What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto's magical shop, Uzumagi, became the most dangerous place on earth? If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. Magnolia was on fire. Quite literally. Someone bring more water. Grey Fullbuster shouted to his guildmates, as he used his ice magic to create a wall of ice around the burning buildings with the hope of containing the blazing fire that was spreading faster than a normal fire could normally do on dry hay. To his surprise, his defense against the fire could only slow its spread just a little. Even after he had closed the wall and formed a dome around the burning buildings to cut the oxygen, it continued to burn as intensely as it had been before. Standing at his side and helping him trying to put the fire away was Juvia Lockster, an enemy-turned-friend of Fairy Tail, as well as Grey's biggest and most obsessed admirer. Being a water mage with the magic to turn herself into water and manipulate the substance at will, Juvia would normally have no problem extinguishing a couple of burning buildings. If the strange fire did not burn her quite literally even when she was in water form. Juvia had tried to do it a moment ago, and it had costed the blue-haired young woman the right sleeve of her most favorite dress. Though, it was a small price to pay, considering that if she hadn't been fast enough to tear that part of her dress off, she would have lost a whole arm by now. I got it. Urza Scarlet, the famous S-class mage of Fairy Tail, spoke up loudly as she dressed herself up in her Sea Empress armor, which was just as revealing as any of her armors, consisting of a plate, which barely covers her large, leaving her belly and her back visible, greatly resembled a seaweed, and has some thin chains hanging from it, with her neck being guarded by a large collar. The armor was completed by a headgear, with a large metal part covering her forehead, bearing a whorl-shaped wave on it, and large fin-shaped protrusions siding her head. With the long sword that came along with the armor, with many small crystals jutting out in every direction from the handguard, Urza summoned a torrent of water from it, and then sent it into the dome of ice her teammate Grey had created to try containing the fire to put it away. As several of their guildmates arrived at their sides with buckets of water given to them by the townspeople, Juvia then used her magic to control the water inside to join force with Urza, increasing the volume of water that they were using to fight against the blazing flame that was burning down a whole district of Magnolia. But to the two girls and everyone's shock, although the water vaporized right on the spot, for a split second it was as if the water itself was seemingly caught fire and started burning, quite literally, causing the entire area to burn even stronger than before. Impossible. Urza gasped, not believing what she had just seen. Damn you Fairy Tail. You came to us and picked a fight, but when you thought you were losing you decided to burn our building along with the whole town down. Banabaster, the guild master of Twilight Ogre, cried at them, trying to put all the blame on Fairy Tail when it was only partly their fault. Please keep your mouth shut for the time being. Makarov, the third guild master of Fairy Tail, spoke in a low, almost casual, but dangerous tone, causing Banabaster and his guild members to back off instantly while cowering in fear. Mira Jane Strauss, the beautiful and attractive demon of Fairy Tail who was standing next to her guild master, also gave them a slight glare, but the demonic aura around her was more than enough to send the rest of Twilight Ogre running. Master, what are we going to do now? Once that she had scared off all the members of Twilight Ogre, Mira turned back around to ask her guild master with a nervous look on her face, having never seen a fire that was burning as strong, as violent, and could not be put away using water being guided and empowered by magic. Just about half an hour ago, she, along with Makarov, Urza and a number of their guildmates had come to Twilight Ogre to settle the debt that Fairy Tail had owed them for the past 7 years that she and the majority of her guild was stuck on Tenro Island. Everything was going just as they had expected it to, with Twilight Ogre threatening them. To answer all the abuse the guild had heaped onto the remnants of Fairy Tail the past 7 years, Makarov had decided to answer them violence to violence, causing a huge fight to break out in Twilight Ogre building. Of course, being two of the most powerful members of Fairy Tail, two S-class mages whose strength were only rivaled by their beauty, Urza and Mira were able to make quick work of the relatively weak guild. Natsu and the rest of his team had added their parts in their victory, allowing Fairy Tail to triumph over the mages of Twilight Ogre in what could be the most one-sided battle Magnolia had ever witnessed, and considering that the town had seen their fair share of battles of those who came to pick a fight with their old magic guild, it was really something. But while Makarov was threatening Banabaster, reminding them who they were and what they had done to those he considered his children, Natsu had stumbled over an unconscious members of Twilight Ogre, causing him to fall flat on his face and dropping a strange magic device that looked a bit like a handheld flamethrower. Another member of the opposing guild had seen it, and grabbed it before Natsu could pick it up, somehow managing to turn it on and unleash the fire that was burning down their guild building and everything else around it, spreading faster than they could possibly imagine. With no choice, Mira and her guildmates had rescued the mages of Twilight Ogre, bringing them out to the streets of Magnolia before working together to put the fire out. However, so far, nothing seemed to work. Even Natsu, a fire dragon slayer, was seemingly powerless against such fire. He had tried to eat it, and almost instantly got symptoms like food poisoning, making him collapse right on the spot. This fire is certainly not normal, Makarov said, as he looked at the device that had unleashed the fire Urza had picked up earlier while running out of Twilight Ogre building. What is this magic device even? The old guild master pondered while examining the magic item, knowing that if normal and magical means could not put away the fire, then they had to look for another solution straight from the source of it. His eyes widened suddenly, however, when he saw a symbol under the handle of the device. Wait, this symbol? I'm back. A roar caused both him and Mira to turn their heads, and saw Natsu hurriedly running his way back to them with the blue exceed happy flying at his side. Sorry Mira-chan, Gigi. Almost as soon as he arrived before them, Natsu collapsed, falling face first into the ground with his eyes swirling and his face turning green. As Happy and then Lucy, who had been trying to convince one of her celestial spirit Aquarius to help them with the firefighting, went over to the pink-haired fire dragon to check on him. His cheeks then puffed out as if he was about to throw up, and throw up right in front of them he did, making Mira and Lucy jump back to avoid the fire that came out of his mouth with a nervous, somewhat forceful chuckle. Makarov rubbed his chin thoughtfully as he looked at the small fire on the ground, lengthening his hand to the side to grab a bucket and bring it over to him to pour some water onto the fire. As he had expected, the fire continued to burn, and the water around it caught fire for a second before vaporizing. Then, the guild master of Fairy Tail grabbed a chunk of dirt and placed it over the fire, but it simply burned right through the chunk as if it wasn't there. Moreover, it appeared that the fire also seemingly needed no fuel to burn, allowing it to continue burning on the rocky ground. After a moment of thinking and studying how Gray's wall of ice was able to slow the fire down somewhat, an idea came to his mind. It was a crazy idea, but judging from the symbol that he saw on the handle of the magic device, it might very well be the only chance for them to stop the fire before it spread to the entire town. Urza, he called loudly, making the scarlet-haired knight turn her head to look at him. Try using your flame armor and put the fire away using its magic. Wah, trust me, we gotta use fire to fight fire. Makarov spoke again before Urza could finish asking her question, as Mira and the other members of Fairy Tail presenting in Magnolia turned their heads to look at him in shock. Urza looked unsurely at her master for a second, before acknowledging the firm look on his face and turning back to re-equip her water armor into her Flame Empress armor, which was dark red in color, with parts resembling that of dragon's limbs. It consisted of a plate, the gauntlets and the greaves, with the plate leaving her shoulder bare and extending down into a one-piece suit, possessing a pair of dragon-like wings that were attached to her back. The gauntlets sported small claw-like protrusions on the hands, while the greaves were also shaped like dragon's claws. In addition to all of this, Urza's hair had also been tied into a pair of high, long pigtails by clips, resembling the horns of a dragon. Gray, open the wall. Urza shouted to the ice mage, who was just as unsure as she and everyone was about Makarov's plan, but he lowered the wall of ice he had created nonetheless, allowing Urza to fly into it before bringing out her sword. With the weapon, Urza then activated the magic that came along with her armor and flew in circles around the burning Twilight Ogre buildings, covering it in the fire that was unleashed from her sword. To everyone's surprise and amazement, the fire created by Urza began to wear down the wildfire that was burning Twilight Ogre building by burning directly into it, seemingly overcoming the wildfire and swallowing them entirely before leaving nothing but ashes behind when they both disappeared. Urza smiled when she saw what happened, and then began to hurriedly do the same thing to other burning buildings in the area, making sure that her fire would burn stronger and hotter than the fire from Natsu's flamethrower to extinguish it, as unbelievable and impossible as it might sound. It worked. As the mages of Fairy Tale and townspeople of Magnolia cheered in relief, Lucy couldn't help but gasp in amazement, before asking loudly in disbelief as she watched Urza putting out the fire from another burning building. But how does that even make sense? I knew it. Makarov spoke with a sigh while looking at the flamethrower in his hand. Always think outside of the box, but don't stray too far from it. Master, how did you come up with that solution? Mira then asked, turning to look at her guild master. She was just as surprised as everyone was, but at the same time, she was relieved that they had finally managed to put the fire under control. There was no telling what it would do if it got to the rest of the town. Instead of answering Mira's question, Makarov looked at Happy and a somewhat recovered Natsu, who pushed himself onto his hands and knees, and asked the latter, holding the magic device in his hand out. Natsu, where did you get this device? Some weirdo from a magic shop a few days ago when I went to Akrifo with Lucy. Natsu answered weakly as he sat down, taking a deep breath of air as he placed a hand on his stomach. He said a fire dragon slayer should be equipped with a decent fire weapon, and it was really cheap, so I bought it to give it a try later. I see. Makarov nodded his head in understanding with a long sigh before continuing to ask, with two fingers pointing at his eyes. Did this shopkeeper wear black, round glasses? He did. Did he give you any instruction or warning on how to use this magic device? Did he have blonde hair too, and wear a lot of orange? He did. Natsu answered again, as he and Mira along with Happy turned their heads to look at the old master of Fairy Tale in surprise and confusion. How did you? I should have known. Only one man in this world can sell a dangerous magic device like this with no warning and a proper instruction for the buyer. Makarov shook his head and said with another sigh, Natsu, it appears that you have had the misfortune of running into that man without knowing who he is. Who the hell is he then? Natsu asked in a serious but dramatic manner as he crossed his arms on his chest, while Happy just tilted his head to the side in confusion. Mira, meanwhile, seemed to have an idea of who the master of her guild was talking about. Could it be? She asked with a small gasp, with her hands slightly covering her mouth. You see the crest here? Makarov said, raising the flamethrower up in the air and showing them the red, spiral crest under the handle. It's rumored to be his, the store owner of the magic shop whose name no one can seem to remember for some reason, and the world's shadiest magic items dealer. Achoo, you should get inside the carriage, master? The atmosphere here is very humid. Nah, I am fine. Some bastard must be badmouthing me, that's all. At the same time, on a single, lovely road divided through a dark forest, a single carriage was slowly traveling. Normally, most travelers went to great lengths to avoid having to travel through a dark forest like this, for it was famously haunted by bandits, outlaws, and dangerous predators and strange magical creatures. And yet, despite such fearsome reputation, the master who was lying on with his legs crossed in the air and his hands folded behind his head on the roof of his carriage and his beautiful, faithful servant thought nothing of it as they continued to traverse the dark woods. But whether this was out of audacity or foolishness was yet to be determined. They were a strange pair, and the carriage they were using to travel was also a strange one, as it wasn't being drawn by horses, but strange creatures that looked like huge, giant birds like chicken with yellow feathers, and long, curved beaks. Several feathers crested out on the top of their heads like small fans, and at the same time, they had very large feathers splayed out behind their fannies like some kind of peacock. Long and sharp-clawed feet attached to twig-thin legs completed this image of oddness. The faithful servant, who was currently driving the carriage for her master, appeared to be a woman in her early 20s, with exceptionally large ass and her most noticeable facial feature being the two large gold horns protruding from the sides of her head and pointing upwards. Upon her head was a white band which separates her dark hair, and tied around her neck was a small orange-colored strap. Her attire, meanwhile, consisted of a very revealing black and orange kimono, which wrapped around her torso with a thick, decorative yellow ribbon that ties behind her back, and complemented by thigh-high socks that revealed her heels and toes. Her master, a man of many talents, appeared to be a handsome man with a lean yet muscular build, with bright spiky blonde hair, bright azure blue eyes that seemingly glowed in the darkness of the woods. He was dressed in a high-collared, black jacket with orange stripes running down the sleeves, over a matching colored shirt and long, black pants, complemented by black sandals. His most noticeable feature, meanwhile, was the whisker-like marks on both sides of his cheeks, similar to that of a fox. "Sayla, how long until we arrive?" the master asked, almost in a lazy manner as he turned around to lie on his side and leaned down to look at his beautiful demon, getting a generous view of her impressive cleavage as she made a map float onto her lap with a simple wave of her hand. Giving it a glance, Sayla then answered her master's question, turning her head around to answer him in a cool but dutiful tone. "We are only 5 minutes away from our destination, master," she answered, and he simply responded by giving her a thumb up before laying back down, closing his eyes and seemingly getting some sleep for the rest of the trip. The next time that he opened his eyes, he found himself in a town full of people, several of whom were gathering around his carriage and looking at the giant birds that pulled it interestingly, having never seen anything like them before in their life. Sayla, who was wearing a large hat to cover her horns, was talking to an elderly man not too far away, standing in front of a 2-story building that looked like it had been used as a convenience store in the past. "Yes, my master, Naruto Uzumaki is right over there." Sayla spoke nonchalantly as she gestured her hand to her master, who simply raised a hand to greet the man she had been talking to before standing up to jump down from the roof of the carriage and walking over to the birds to feed them some beans, making the townspeople gathering around them cheer when he tossed a bean in the air and make one of the birds jump up to catch it in her beak. "Everything is in order, yes?" "Why yes, Sayla-san." The elderly man responded in a shaky tone, not because she was using her magic to force him to do it, but simply because he was just too old. "Here is the key to the establishment. It's yours," he said, handing the busty woman before him the key of the building next to them. "All right." Sayla nodded her head simply and took the key from him, not bothering herself with the trouble of showing him, a human, her gratitude. The only man who deserved her gratitude was her master, and she would rather order her body to throw itself over a bridge before she could bring herself to thank a human. With that, Sayla made her way back to her master, who was checking their stuff after giving the bag of beans to the children so that they got to feed the birds pulling his carriage themselves. The crowd of people had dissolved somewhat, and only the children remained behind to play with the large but friendly birds. "Your key, master," Sayla said, dutifully handing Naruto the key to the building with both hands. "Ah, thank you, Sayla." Naruto grinned as he took the key from his servant and put the piece of paper in his hand down to make his way over to the building they had just purchased while tossing the key up and down in his hand. "So, shall we?" he asked, and with a nod of her head, Sayla began to help her master set up his beloved shop, with Naruto himself visiting a few stores around the marketplace to build the necessary equipment to clean up the dusty building, with the demoness using her power to multitask, taking care of several things at the same time. They both had no idea for how long they would be staying in this town, since they were always on the move to avoid unnecessary trouble with angry customers. But if this was where they would be staying for a duration of time, then Sayla would never allow anything less than perfection to surround her and her master. "All right, Sayla, raise that up." Around 6 in the evening, the two finally managed to set up their magic shop, lining up the shelves inside with a large number of artifacts, weapons and magic items. At the moment, however, they were both standing outside, looking at the building as Sayla used her power to levitate and raise a neon sign up in the air and attached it to the 2 hooks Naruto had placed there beforehand. Almost as soon as it was placed upon the 2 hooks, the sign was turned on and glowed a neon orange color, illuminating the area before the shop. Grinning from ear to ear and nodding his head in approval, Naruto then walked into his newly established shop, with a dutiful Sayla following behind him and closing the door behind them with the "open" flip sign hanging on it, marking the start of their business and yet another town of fury. It did not take it long, however, for them to get their first customers, a group of mages from the local magic guild. They walked into the shop excitedly, expecting to find some decent magic items that they could use to expand their arsenal, or just to entertain themselves in time of boredom. What they found inside, however, was a rather dark and somewhat sinister atmosphere. There was no direct lighting inside the place but those that came from some of the magical artifacts on the shelves lining the walls, glowing dimly and menacingly. Although none of them had a good enough eyesight to see well in the dark, the mages could all tell that they had come to the right place, as the shop seemed to offer a wide range of item variety, with so many different useful-looking artifacts and weapons in store for them to choose from. It was as if the moment that they turned their heads, something new would appear before them. Then suddenly, the moment that they all entered the Shio, the door behind them suddenly slammed shut, and the lights on the other side of the room were turned on, illuminating the store owner who was standing behind his counter, smiling mysteriously behind his glasses as he tapped the tips of his fingers slowly against one another. "Welcome to Uzumagi Magic Shop, Mages of Sabertooth," the man said with slight chuckle. "Here, I can assure that you will be able to find and buy the best magical merchandise in the world. You want it, we have it. Just tell me the magic that you need, and I will bring the items that before you, and allow you to buy them with a reasonable price, and nothing but a good laugh, for me." He smirked evilly, his perfect white teeth shining as the lights shone onto them. The mages of Sabertooth couldn't help but glance at each other somewhat nervously, despite taking great pride in the strength as the members of the #1 Guild of Fury, which allowed them to have no fear in no one and nothing. But for some reason, however, they couldn't help but have a feeling that they had come to the wrong place looking for a useful magic item, and feel a chill running down their spines as they glanced at the store owner, who smirked and declared proudly while gesturing his hands to his wares. "So, what can I get you?" "So, master, who exactly is this mysterious magic traveling salesman, and what exactly is his shop?" Urza asked in curiosity, looking at the old third master of Fairy Tail as she ate a slice of her favorite strawberry cheesecake while sitting with her teammates at one of the tables inside the rundown tavern that they were using as their temporary guild building, locating on the top of a small hill near mountains and in a woody area not too far away from Magnolia Town. Things had been tough for Fairy Tail, but at least they still had a place to gather every day as a mage guild. "Oh, I thought you of all people should have heard more about him than any of us, Urza-chan," Makarov stated as he drank some beer from his mug, the magic flamethrower that he had confiscated from Natsu, due to not trusting the pinkhead to never use it again, lying next to him on the bar counter where he was sitting. "After all, I am pretty sure that some of your armors were distributed, or even made, by that man. Most magic items in this world are rumored to have passed through his hands and his shop at least once." "Really?" the scarlet-haired Titania asked in surprise, as the rest of the guild turned to look at their third and now sixth master in bewilderment. "The blacksmith who sold me some of my armors said that a few of them were pre-made by the same person, but he didn't know who." "Well, no one does," Makarov replied with a shrug. "If we do, then that man wouldn't have been an urban legend. I think the Sorcerer magazine once wrote an article about him years ago," Lucy pointed out, and Mirajane nodded her head in confirmation as she continued to serve drinks to the other members of Fairy Tail. Being a celestial mage and someone who was fairly interested in cool magic items, she had heard about the rumors of the world's shadiest magic items dealer and his magic shop in the past, and at one point wanted to know what he could offer her. He was rumored to at one point possess every magic item in the world, but sold them away to other magic users instead of keeping them for himself. The stellar mage then continued, recalling what she read in that article on that Sorcerer magazine years ago. Because of this, there were even unofficial sources claiming that he was the progenitor of Holder magic, or at least popularized the method of utilizing magic through magic items. "Wait, if that's the case, won't it make him like thousands of years old?" Max Allure, one of the members of Fairy Tail who wasn't stuck on Tenro for 7 years, questioned in shock. As Lucy Chan said, those were just rumors from unreliable sources. "I have heard even crazier theories than those. There's a reason why many people don't believe he exists," Mira answered with a shrug of her shoulders, before continuing as she tilted her head to the side with a finger tapping her cheek. "But after that flamethrower incident today, I think he's really out there, selling cursed items to unsuspected customers. Or maybe the salesman Natsu ran into was a fraud pretending to be him. His symbol is pretty easy to copy and his fame isn't something a black market dealer could ignore if they wish to successfully sell their illegal merchandises," Makarov pointed out, glancing over to the flamethrower before continuing with a deadpan expression. "Still, judging by the ridiculousness of this flamethrower, I highly doubt that it wasn't him. Who would even come up with the idea of making a device that fires fire that can only be put out by having another fire burn it? So I take that his stuff is harmful in one way or another?" Gray questioned. "Most of them, at least. There's a saying that when someone buys an item from him, the gods will toss a coin and the world will hold its breath to see how it will land," Makarov answered, making a coin-flipping gesture with his hand. "If that person manages to use the item with no problem, then great, congratulations to them. But if that person is unfortunate enough to buy a cursed artifact, then they might accidentally start the apocalypse the next day and end the world in 7 days. What the fuck? There's a reason why besides the world's shadiest magic items dealer, he's also known as the devil salesman or the dealer from hell. Makarov chuckled and took another sip of his beer, chuckling in amusement at the faces the members of his guild were making while glaring at Natsu, who laughed nervously alongside his exceed before swallowing hard, realizing that the flamethrower he bought could have burnt down the entire town of Magnolia, or worse. I am sure that it's just exaggeration to show just how bad his customer services are, or that he doesn't care what he sells, who he sells it to. Those who were said to have run into him in the past claimed all that he cared about was a successful business, so at least there's some truth to it. The third master finished with a shrug. Damn, talk about being irresponsible. Wakaba commented, lighting up another cigarette as he tried to take in all the information that he had just been given about the legendary devil salesman. So, I take it that no one really knows who he is or what his shop is called. Natsu, do you remember anything else? Shaking his head, the pink-haired fire dragon slayer crossed his arms on his chest, his face screwing into a deeply thoughtful expression as he tried to remember the name of the shop and recall other things about store owners beside his hair color and clothing, but was unable to for some reason. Can't remember, can you? Makarov asked with another chuckle. Well, no one does. All that everyone knows about this man and his shop are that he has blonde hair, wears a lot of orange, and occasionally a pair of black, round glasses, all of which could easily be faked by just about anyone. Oh, that's right. Lucy nodded her head in confirmation, tapping her chin thoughtfully before continuing the master's words. In that article about him, the author said that his customers would remember visiting his shop and buying things from him, but nothing else. It's like all of the most important details about him and his shop were wiped from his customers' minds at one point after leaving his shop, and another strange thing is that they would never notice it until someone pointed it out to them. Don't know about you guys, but this is starting to get a bit creepy now. Jet of Team Shadow Gear spoke with a nervous chuckle, making the younger members of the guild shudder with a cold chill running down their spines. Well, regardless, it's the reason why no one can hold him accountable for the misuses of the items that he sells. They can't fully remember. Makarov finished. Hey, you guys watch me. I am going to remember him. Natsu laughed loudly as he got up, putting one foot on the table and looking challengingly at the rest of the guild while he laughed, and Happy cheered for him. The older, more mature members of Fairy Tail just laughed at him in amusement, but one of the younger. As if that flame for brain of yours can really remember anything important to begin with. What was that, Ice Princess? Here we go again. Makarov grumbled and put his empty mug of beer down as Natsu and Grey butt-headed, while most of the rest of the guild cheered and taunted them to fight each other. As usual, Mira-chan, can I have another beer please? Right away, master. Mira-jane said, smiling beautifully as she rushed over to the old guild master and put another mug of beer down before him, before looking over to the flamethrower and then asked, what are you going to do to this, master? I will find a way to destroy it. Even if the person selling this to Natsu might not be him, it is still far too dangerous to be left in the hands of someone who doesn't know what he might end up doing with it. Makarov answered, making Mira nod her head at him in understanding and agreement. Let's hope that we are not going to encounter any of these things again in the future. Yes, I do hope so. Mira nodded her head before she decided to ask the master in interest, so, master, you sure seem to know a lot about him. By any chance you did some research on him, or had an encounter with him in the past? You can say that, Makarov answered, sounding a bit awkward as Mira tilted her head to the side to look at him in confusion. But it's just like Natsu. I can't remember much of it beside the thing that I bought from him. Really? What did you buy from him then, Gigi? Natsu asked excitedly, peeking his head up from under the bar counter. Makarov choked on his own beer, not expecting anyone, especially Natsu, to press on with the matter. So he just waved it off and drank the rest of his beer. Nothing you should be concerned about, Brad. Ah, the pink-haired dragon slayer groaned in disappointment, before looking over to Mira, who just shrugged before she went back to serve foods and drinks to everyone in the building. However, judging from the way the master was acting, Mira couldn't help but wonder if Makarov had bought something weird or disastrous from the devil salesman in the past. Have fun with those wands, guys. Naruto Uzumaki, the store owner of his magic shop Uzumagi, laughed wholeheartedly and cheerfully as he waved his hands goodbye to a group of traveling mages, who had just visited his shop and bought a set of magic wands, which were known to be mostly used by magic entertainers due to their spells having colorful effects, to entertain themselves on their journey to Crocus, the capital of Fury. Ah, business is booming. Even after he had stopped laughing, the blonde continued to grin in satisfaction, putting his hands on his hips as he looked at the marketplace before him. It had only been a date since they moved to this new town, but they had already gotten a lot of customers, from both Sabretooth, the local guild of the town that was also known as the current strongest guild of Fury, and traveling mages, like the group that had just left. Not all came to buy new magic items, though, as he also offered a wide range of magic-related services, like magic weapons maintenance, and even full recovery of damaged artifacts. "Master, aren't the effects that those wands make when casting a spell real?" His faithful demon servant, who he would like to regard as an assistant more but she still refused to consider herself as someone not beneath him, asked as she walked to his side with a catalog of the items that they had in the shop in her hands. "So? They asked for realistic effects, and I just happened to have some wands capable of really realistic effects in the shop. I see no problem there," the blonde reasoned humorously, pointing a finger as he leaned down to smile at Sayla, who just looked at him before nodding her head in understanding, closing her catalog and following her master as he said, "Come on, let's head back in before our next customers arrive." In the end, it was as if the man had jinxed his own shop by saying that business was booming, leaving him to spend the entire morning waiting for his next customers in boredom. For several hours, Naruto did nothing but sit there with one foot on his shop counter as he sat on his chair behind it, throwing a rubber ball against the wall and catching it when it bounced back to him, yawning. Occasionally, he would glance over to Sayla, watching her as she dutifully tended to the items on the shelves of his shop with a broom, making sure that they were in perfect condition. It's not like he had anything else interesting to do, and Sayla had never failed to entertain him even while she wasn't intentionally doing it. It was around noon while Naruto was having lunch, a cup of instant ramen, that the door of his shop was opened from the outside, ringing the bell that he had put on the top of it. Looking up, the blonde saw that his next customers were a group of 3 appearing to be mages from Sabretooth with the white crest on the left shoulder of the slim, yet muscular young man who appeared to be their leader. He had spiky blonde hair, and slanted dark blue eyes, with a thin, diagonal scar above the right one. His clothing was a blue vest with golden outer edges and inner edges covered by a prominent trimming of gray fur over a short, cream top, leaving his muscular upper abdominals exposed. His arms were covered by dark blue gloves reaching up to his mid-bicep, with their upper edges being adorned by light gray bands hanging down several centimeters. Below, he wore loose, cream-colored pants, being held up by suspenders, which were attached to the pant loops by square-shaped rings that are gold in color. Over them, he donned a pair of dark blue footwears that went up to his thighs and attached to the upper edge of his pants. The second person of the trio was another slim, but muscular young man of average height, with shoulder-length messy black hair and red eyes with slit pupils. His outfit consisted of a long, black cape reaching down to his feet, with a much lighter collar circling his neck, a plain gray shirt with prominent brown cuffs and a pale blue cloth waistguard, consisting of 4 long pieces of cloth reaching down below his knees. To complement, he also wore a pair of armored boots, which bore plates bearing the very same motif with that of his waistguard. The last of them, meanwhile, was a beautiful and incredibly attractive young woman with short, light blue hair and fringes framing her face, with a black rose ornament on the left side of her head. Her clothing was a cloak clasped together by a star-shaped clip, with feathery protrusions that cover her chest, shoulders and mid-back, over her blouse and short miniskirt. The cloak flared at her feet, where it was divided into flowing sections secured by ribbons. In addition to her heel boots, she also wore a black pair of socks that stopped at her mid-thighs. In addition, the 2 males also had 2 anthropomorphous cats accompanying them, with one having dark brown fur, while the other was a green cat dressed in a pink frog-like suit. So, Dragonslayer number 1, Dragonslayer number 2, there exceeds and another one of those busty celestial mages. Naruto thought in his mind as he quickly finished his cup of instant ramen before wiping his mouth with a handkerchief that was handed to him by Sayla and standing up, smiling cheerily as he greeted the group of saber-tooth mages while rubbing his palms together. "Welcome. Welcome to Uzumagi, my not-so-humble establishment, my dear customers. Hey there. The blonde-haired young man responded with a confident smile while the other two just stared at him nonchalantly. I am Sting. This is Rogue, Yukino, Lecter and Frosh. We are from Sabretooth. Welcome then, mages of Sabretooth. Naruto nodded his head, smiling with a polite bow of his head. Behind him, Sayla followed his example and did the same gesture, but it was not because she wanted to show those humans and exceeds any form of respect or politeness. It was simply because her master was doing it, and he had told her to do it to his customers to leave a good first impression, which was one of the keys of his business. Now, how may I help you? We will be just looking around. See if there's anything that catches our fancy. Sting answered. We heard from our friends that you sold some really cool magic items here. Yes, I remembered your guildmates visited my shop last night. Naruto nodded his head in confirmation. They were quite pleased with the quality of the items that I offered them, and left happy customers with the discounts that I gave them. I see. No wonder why those guys look so happy with those weapons. Sting said, looking at the items on the shelves for a moment before looking back, and suddenly realizing that the store owner was standing right in front of him, eyeing him interestingly with one hand rubbing his chin, causing the white dragon slayer to move his body back instinctively in caution, because he couldn't see or even feel the guy move. Behind him, Rogue and Yukino were having the same feeling, as they could only look at the store owner of Uzumagi in mild shock. They had taken their eyes off of him for only a second to look around the shop, but the next instant when they looked back, he was right in front of them, not understanding how he was able to move so fast, without even making the slightest sound or them feeling it. After a moment, the blonde leaned his head back and grinned cheerily at Sting as he asked, White Dragon Slayer, yes? How did you? I am the store owner of a magic shop, young man. The more I understand my customers, the better I will be able to sell my merchandises. Not to mention that you two are pretty famous among the people of this town. Naruto chuckled and answered Sting's question before he could finish it before lowering his head again. Now, where is my manner? My name is Naruto Uzumaki. Feel free to call me Naruto if you wish. Okay, Sting said, nodding his head while looking unsurely at the blonde. The guy looked relatively harmless, but for some reason, his instincts were telling him otherwise. It wouldn't be strange if he was a mage too, and a really strong one at that, just like them, since most store owners of magic shops had to be able to use magic to a degree to know what they were selling, and to demonstrate the usages of their merchandises to their customers. Excuse me, Uzumaki-sama. The white-haired girl, Yukino, addressed him calmly and politely as she stepped forward, making the blonde raise an eyebrow at the respectful suffix she just used to speak to him. I saw your workshop when we entered your store, so I wonder if by any chance you also give maintenance services to magic items such as celestial keys. Oh yes, I do, my dear. Naruto nodded his head with a smile, making the girl nod before bringing out a pair of golden keys and showing them to him. Zodiac keys. It's been a while since I have seen any of those golden keys. You want me to restore them back to new, yes? Yes, please. Yukino nodded. Sayla, can you please show these two gentlemen around? Smiling at Yukino, Naruto then looked over his shoulder to call out to Sayla, who lowered her head to him before walking over to stand at his side. Sting. Rogue, this is my assistant, Sayla. If something catches your attention, feel free to ask her. She will answer all of your questions about the items that we have here. Alright then. Sting nodded his head, his gaze following Sayla when she walked past him. Please follow me this way. The demoness requested nonchalantly, and the twin dragon slayers of Sabretooth began to follow her around the shop. This way, my dear. Naruto smiled, with a hand gesture to the side and led Yukino to his workshop, where he did all the side services of his magic shop. Your keys, please. He requested, extending his hand forward to receive the two golden keys from Yukino, who then handed them to him after making up her mind to trust that he wouldn't steal or damage them. Holding the two keys in his hand, Naruto then took his seat at the table of his workshop, and opened a drawer to bring out a box of polishing gel and small brushes. With the tools, the blonde began to work, polishing Libra's golden key with a mini brush after applying some gel onto it, turning a large magnifying glass down in front of his face to get a closer and more detailed look at the key, all the while Yukino stood there and watched in interest. Having seen others done it before, she could see that the store owner knew exactly what he was doing, and he was extremely skilled in the art. I can tell that you keep your keys in good condition. Naruto spoke up, as he turned the key around and applied a special gel onto a very small crack near the crest of the heavenly scales, before using a screwdriver-like tool to gently tap it. Beside this very, very old crack here, they are both in perfect condition. Yes, I tried to polish them every day. They are very important to me. The white-haired girl answered him calmly, making Naruto turn his head around to look at her for a second before shaking his head and turning back with a chuckle. Is there something wrong? Oh, nothing, my dear. It's nothing at all, he said, before spraying the key with a magic dust from an orange spray can, making it spark and glow for a moment before the aura dimmed down. Yukino could only look at him and her key in surprise, having never seen anything like that when she brought her keys over to other magic shops for maintenance. Placing the golden key of the celestial spirit Libra down, Naruto then moved on to the other key, Pisces. Since it wasn't damaged in any way, his maintenance work on the key of the paired fish was quick. There, done, Naruto announced, as he turned his chair around and handed the 2 keys over to Yukino. There you go. Good as new. As Yukino took her keys back from him, the young woman couldn't help but marvel at the sight of them, as they glistened beautifully under the light with a faint aura about them. To her, they looked better than new. Thank you, Uzumaki-sama. Yukino couldn't help but bow deeply to the man, who simply laughed while waving his hand at her in response. So, are you still interested in buying some silver keys to expand your arsenal? A celestial mage can't always rely on her golden keys, you know, despite them being the strongest of the celestial spirits. Naruto pointed out, making Yukino nod her head in agreement. Yes, please. With that, the blonde walked away and disappeared into the back of his shop, leaving Yukino behind to look around the place, occasionally glancing over to Sting and Rogue, as they browsed the other items with their exceeds, arguing which do what and if they would be useful to them. Meanwhile, Naruto's assistant Sayla stood on the side with a look of displeasure on her face, looking as if she did not want to have anything to do with them. However, she seemed to have no problem doing her job, answering every question that they had for her, and sometimes stepping forward to stop them whenever they tried to take an item off the shelves. Boo! Kya! Yukino squealed in shock, hitting the chair and almost stumbling over when Naruto suddenly appeared behind her with a flashlight shining on his face, startling her with a low, but menacing boo. Yukino, are you alright? Lecter and Stain, being followed closely by Rogue and his cat Frosh, asked in surprise as they dashed to the side to get a clear look at Yukino, who clutched her chest while taking deep breaths to calm herself down. Hey you, what are you doing to our teammate? They both asked, glaring at Naruto, who laughed humorously and lowered the flashlight down before turning it off. It's alright, Sting-sama. Yukino spoke up, holding a hand out to stop Sting from trying to do anything to Naruto. He just caught me by surprise, that's all. Are you? Before Sting could finish asking the question, Naruto tossed the flashlight to him, making the white dragon slayer raise his hand up to catch it before asking while looking at the device in confusion, what is this? It's a white light flashlight. Kinda self-explanatory, is it? Naruto answered with a shrug. You are a white dragon slayer, so maybe when you run out of power you can put that thing in your mouth and turn it on to eat the white light and replenish your strength. Huh, I see. Nodding his head in understanding, Sting then turned the flashlight on to try it out with Lecter, allowing Naruto to turn back to smile at Yukino, who dropped her calm demeanor and looked at him nervously. So, this is the real you, or at least, you were just acting calm and collected, weren't you? Naruto asked, as he brought out a small chest and put it on the table of his workshop. Yukino couldn't help but look at him in surprise, not understanding how he could look through her facade. Don't worry, I will not ask again if you are not comfortable with it. Ah, it's alright, Uzumaki-sama. Yukino shook her head and said, lowering her gaze down a little, it's just. I don't want to appear weak while traveling with Sting-sama and Rogue-sama, 2 of the strongest members of my guild, that's all. So putting on a calm and serious face makes you appear strong? Naruto asked, chuckling in amusement as he crossed his arms on his chest and leaned back against his table. I guess the weight of being the member of the number 1 magic guild right now is a bit too heavy for you, isn't it? Why yes. Yukino smiled softly as she tilted her head to the side, glancing at Sting and Rogue, Everyone in Sabretooth is really strong and amazing. They all use really powerful and unique magic, while I am just a celestial mage, who summons spirits to fight my battles for me, compared to even the spirits that I love so much. She was stopped, when Naruto suddenly moved his hand out toward her and flicked her forehead gently, making the white-haired young woman look at him in surprise. You are looking at your magic the wrong way, you know. Your spirits are only as strong as you are, even the zodiac. Naruto pointed out with a gesture of his hand to the side, looking quite smug as he went on to lecture the young woman. The more magic you have, the stronger your summons will be. Also, with more magic power, you are more likely to continue standing on your feet after performing multiple summons, and not leave you vulnerable in a fight. You know that if you get killed, then your contracts with your spirits can be terminated, right? Yes. Here, Naruto then said, opening the chest and showing Yukino a wide range of silver keys, several of which she recognized but had only heard about in old stories of celestial magic. These are some of the rarest keys among the silver group, each having a unique magic to their own. They are not as strong as the zodiac, but they are far from useless like those little snowmen. I bet that an experienced celestial mage can lead them to victory against any enemy, even one who controls more than a handful of zodiac spirits. Yukino gasped in amazement, as she looked into the box and took out a pair of keys. One was the key of the bear cub while the other was of the swan. Have more confidence in your ability, young lady, Naruto said, closing the chest as if he believed that Yukino had made her decisions to buy them and wasn't going to be putting the keys back in their slots. Stay true to yourself, and prove your strength with what you can do and capable of, and not with the faces that you make. The blonde finished, making the serious face Yukino had made when she first entered his shop, making the young woman look at him in surprise for a second before giggling softly as she hid her smile behind her hand. Thank you, Uzumaki-sama, she said, lowering her head to him gratefully before holding the 2 keys in her hands up. I will buy these 2 keys. Great, Naruto smiled, before pausing for a moment with a thoughtful look on his face as he looked at Yukino. It was as if he was making an important decision in his mind. Wait here, promise I won't startle you this time. With that said, the blonde disappeared into the back of his shop again, and returned a moment later with a small box in his hand. Yukino could only look at it curiously, before widening her eyes in shock when Naruto opened the box and showed her a key she had never seen before inside. It was a black key, ending in a spade-like top that was connected to the key's bow by a dark serpentine figure that spiraled around the blade of the key. The center of the bow was black, stamped with the crest of its zodiac spirit, with another serpent spiraling around it. This couldn't be. Yukino stammered in absolute shock, sweats pouring down her face as she glanced at the black key, having heard of its legends. Much like the 12th zodiac key, it was unique, and said to be the key to summon the 13th spirit, whose strength far surpassed the 12's. I won this key in a bet with an old geezer, so I will give it to you for free if you are willing to make a bet with me, Naruto said, causing Yukino to gasp in shock, before the blonde turned over to his table and grabbed a pen and a piece of paper to write and draw something down. You want to fight alongside your spirit, yes? Then try this spell out. If you can master it in 3 months, then you can have Afiyukas for free, but if you can't, then I will take her key back. With that said, Naruto handed the piece of paper to Yukino, who took it from him with shaky hands and looked at it for a moment before gasping again in shock. Try it. Ask your spirits for more information if you need, Naruto said with a small smile as he pointed the pen at her, and always remember, your spirits are only as strong as I am. Yukino nodded her head in understanding, before bowing her head deeply to Naruto while clutching the piece of paper between her hands. Thank you, Uzumaki-sama. And call me Naruto. Addressing someone with the last name makes them feel old, you know. Yes, of course, Naruto-sama. Are you sure that giving that girl the black key is a good idea, master? Sayla asked, as she stood with her master watching Yukino and her 2 Dragon Slayer friends leaving and making their ways back to their guild building. Stain had bought the white light flashlight Naruto had shown him, while Rogue had gotten a bag of potato chips for Frosh, not knowing that the chips would cause his cat to turn into a tiger later for a day. I think it's fine though. I have left Afiyuka's key in my back room long enough, Naruto answered as he waved his hand to Yukino. Not to mention that there are not many celestial mages left in this world, and even fewer of them actually care for their spirits the same way that girl does. She might not be able to master Star Dress in 3 months, but at least I know that I have left Ophiuchus in good hands. I see. I trust your judgment, master. Sayla said, making Naruto smile at her before turning around and following her master back into the shop. Later that day, they got to watch a very excited Frosh, who had turned into a giant tiger the size of a small house, chasing his Dragon Slayer partner and their guildmates out of the guild building before Naruto had to explain to them that the green Exceed would turn back in a day. Naruto, and especially Sayla, didn't like them screaming at him while demanding an explanation why he didn't warn them about the snacks, but the blonde simply replied that it was because they did not ask, and it was their fault expecting to find a normal bag of potato chips in a magic shop. Not to mention that it was Frosh who intentionally chose to chase them, since the potato chips only turned those ate it physically, not mentally. It was a bit troublesome doing all the explanations, even with Sayla's help, but the laugh from watching them getting chased around the entire town was totally worth it in the end for Naruto. Since the day that he decided to open up his own magic shop in an era of magic, there's nothing that he had come to hate more than 2 consecutive days of not having customers. It's not that he really cared about the sales, even though he wanted to ensure that Uzumagi was a successful business. He had more money than anyone in the world would know what to do with, and very few things to spend them on besides paying his sources for new magic items and artifacts to resupply and restock his shop, since it was his main concern nowadays. No, what Naruto cared about was the entertainment of knowing his clueless customers were going to get themselves into troubles with the stuffs that they bought from his shop that they could have easily avoided if they had asked more questions and not gotten their eyes blinded by the item's ridiculously amazing powers and cared more about the downsides of using them. One could say that he was pranking people without having to get his hands dirty, letting them do the job for him themselves while he could just sit back and watch. Still, if one of his customers somehow managed to get their hands on an incredibly useful item with no drawbacks, then he would take pleasure in enjoying their satisfaction. After all, he aimed to run a successful business in distributing magical merchandise, and if his business only had bad reviews then it wouldn't be a successful business at all. Nonetheless, going too long without customers made his days really boring. A month had passed since he moved his shop into this town that was the home of the current strong guild in Fury, Sabretooth, and he had more or less become well acquainted with the townspeople and especially the mages, who always paid his shop a visit at least once every day to see what he had in store for them, having never failed to discover something new each time they were there. It was why the sudden lack of customers surprised him, as it had been 2 days since he had a mage came by, or even just dropped by to browse his merchandise. Maybe I should just start giving out discount coupons again, Naruto said, murmuring to himself while sitting on the chair outside of his shop and watching as people, a couple of mages and normal townspeople, walked by without even giving Uzumagi a second glance. Nodding his head to himself, Naruto then leaned to the side and opened the door of his shop with one hand to speak into the place. Sayla, do we still have those discount coupons around? Yes, I believe so, master. Sayla answered him dutifully before she left to get those coupons for him, allowing the blonde-haired immortal shinobi to turn back around and continue to wait for his next customers to show up, all the while watching the marketplace expecting something exciting to soon happen. At least between him and his demon servant, she seemed to be in a much better mood than he was, and it wasn't hard for him to understand why. Sayla hated humans, and the shop not having any customers meant that she did not have to deal with any of them. Around noon, while Naruto was enjoying a cup of instant ramen noodle being made for him by Sayla, the blonde noticed 2 small, but familiar figures crossing the streets of the marketplace together and decided to get them attention, while waving his chopsticks in the air. Hey, Lecter, Frosh, over here, he called, causing the 2 Exceed partners of the twin dragon slayers of Sabretooth to turn their heads and look at him for a moment before crossing the street to come stand before him, as Naruto quickly finished his meal to talk to them. What do you want? The brown-furred cat asked in slight annoyance as he gazed at Naruto. Lecter probably still hadn't forgotten what happened a month ago when Naruto sold Rogue the bag of potato chips that turned Frosh into a giant green tiger when he gave it to his Exceed partner. Whoa, why so hostile? I simply want to know where your partners are, Naruto replied, faking a surprise expression as he raised both hands up to defend himself after throwing the empty cup of instant ramen into a nearby waste bin. Haven't seen much of those two lately. Mind telling me where they are? We don't have. Hey, Frosh. Before he could finish telling that to Naruto, Lecter ended up crying out his friend's name when the green-furred Exceed reached forward with both hands to accept a colorful, but incredibly suspicious-looking bag of seaweed-flavored snacks from the store owner of Uzumagi, who brought it out from nowhere and offered it to him. Oi, don't just give him weird stuff like that. The brown-furred Exceed scoffed at Naruto as he grabbed his friend by his frog suit and dragged him back, preventing him from taking the bag of snacks from his hand. I can assure you that this is a normal bag of snacks. Look. As he said that, Naruto tore open the bag and started eating the snacks in a casual manner and with a smug grin on his face. I thought it was only fair for me to give you guys something back in return for the answer, but it's fine if you don't want to accept it. The blonde finished with a shrug. TCH, if you didn't sell us those suspicious items then we might have trusted you a lot more. Lecter pointed out, crossing his arms on his chest in annoyance as Naruto, who simply shrugged his shoulders in response, handed Frosh the bag of seaweed-flavored snacks after grabbing a handful of those and keeping them for himself. This time, Lecter did not try to stop his friend from taking it, allowing the Exceed in the pink frog suit to eat the snacks delightfully. And also, Sting-kun and Rogue are busy preparing for the upcoming Grand Magic Tournament. Oh, so it is that time of the year already? Naruto asked, sounding genuinely surprised as he reached for the back pocket of his pants and took out an orange notebook, which he used to take note of important things so he wouldn't forget about them. Flipping through a few pages, it did not take long for him to find the notes that he had made about this year's Grand Magic Games, which would be taking place in 2 months. It was an event that was held every year in the Crocus, the capital of Fury, by the Magic Council and the royal family of the kingdom to determine the strongest magic guild in Fury. It was first held 7 years ago, and for 7 years Sabretooth had won every tournament, beating all of their competitors who were much more famous than them in the past and eventually marking themselves the #1 guild in Fury. Sting and Rogue are going to participate, aren't they? Naruto asked, though the answer was rather obvious. Being 2 of the most powerful and famous mages of Sabretooth, without a doubt the 2 would be selected by the master to take part in the game. The others probably also included the master's daughter, Minerva Orland, who Naruto had seen looking at his shop in interest once when she returned to her guild from a mission. Of course, they are. They are the strongest after all. Lecter pointed out proudly with one paw pointing at Naruto. Fro thinks so too. Frosh spoke in agreement and copied his friend's gesture, them both pointing their paws at Naruto and making the blonde chuckle in amusement. What about Yukino? The store owner of Uzumagi then asked in interest. Yukino might not be among the strongest members of Sabretooth, but she was the one he had entrusted the black key of Ophiuchus to, with the snake charmer being known for her strength that surpassed the other zodiac spirits. Moreover, he had seen her begin her training in the celestial spellstar dress, which would allow her to grow even stronger than she was right now if she could master it. He had no doubt that she could be a prime candidate for Sabretooth team if she managed to pull it off in 3 months. I think she's scheduled as the substitute of the team. Lecter answered, though he did not look so sure himself. Naruto had yet to have the honor to meet the current master of Sabretooth, but he had no doubt that the man was the one making the choices of who would be representing his guild at the Grand Magic Games. While he might be the reason Sabretooth was the #1 guild that they were today, Naruto had also heard that Gemma Orland was an asshole who ruthlessly ruled over the mages of his guild with an iron fist, and wanted strength over everything else from them. Well then, thank you for your cooperation, lads, Naruto said as he closed the notebook in his hands, having gotten and remembered everything that he needed to know about this year's Grand Magic Games. Reaching his hands into his jackets, Naruto then pulled out 2 discount coupons Sayla had given him an hour ago and handed them over to Lecter. Here, give these to your Dragon Slayer partners and tell them I have a couple of items in the store that might pique their interest. Alright, Lecter nodded his head in understanding, seeing no harm in handing the Dragon Slayers the discount coupons before he asked, glaring at Naruto suspiciously. You are not going to sell them anything suspicious, aren't you? Nope, was all the answer that the 2 Exceeds got from the mischievous store owner, who then raised a hand and waved at them dismissively. Now shoo. Get out of here before people mistook this place for a pet shop. With a scoff, Lecter took his leave with Frosh, who turned around and waved his paw at Naruto, making the blonde chuckle amusedly and do the same in return before reaching to the side and knocking his knuckle a couple of times on the door of his shop. A few seconds later, Sayla emerged, looking at her master curiously as she asked, "You call, master? Grab a chair and sit with me, Sayla," Naruto said, and the demoness did what she was told to do, making her way back into the shop to grab a chair before heading out and sitting down next to her master, who then said as he brought out a bottle of water and started drinking from it, "Don't know if you notice, but this year's Grand Magic game is in 2 months. I see. You don't sound very enthusiastic. My apology, master. It's just that I have never liked the event, or wanted to bother myself with humans and their pointless affairs. It's irritating and noisy." Sayla lowered her head apologetically to him, making Naruto laugh lightly in response before she looked up and said with a hand on her chest, "However, if your wish is to go to the event, then it will be my honor to accompany you there, master." "I will. And by the way, I am glad that you can speak up your mind so freely of how you feel about something, without worrying too much about what I am going to think about it," Naruto said, grinning at Sayla, who smiled softly as she looked to the side. "Nonetheless, I am sure this year might be a lot more interesting with the return of Fairy Tail. Also, you might feel a bit better if you see the event from my standpoint. The thing here is that you only see a bunch of humans gathering together to watch another bunch of humans fighting over a title with fancy, colorful magic, while I see a business opportunity." "Oh, so we will be moving the shop to Crocus, master?" "For the duration of the event, yes. I like it here, so we will be staying in this town for a while," Naruto answered with a nod of his head. "There's truly nowhere better to sell our merchandise than the city that will be hosting the biggest magic event of the year. We won't need to bring everything with us though, just enough to fill the shelves like a regular store is acceptable. I will start with the preparation immediately, master." Sayla spoke firmly, making Naruto smile at her in response before nodding his head. "Then I will leave it to you then. It's best that we start preparing for it now," Naruto said, then opened up his notebook to flip to a page with some numbers and addresses on it. "I know a real estate agency in Crocus. I am sure that they can get us a decent place to stay and open up a small shop there. Also, I will be inviting Celine to watch the event with us." His statement caused Sayla to widen her eyes in surprise, and for a moment she did not know what to say in response to her master. She knew who Celine was and what kind of relationship that the woman had with her master, but it had been years since the last time they saw each other. "You don't like me having Celine around?" "No, of course not, master." Sayla shook her head and denied any idea that Naruto had in his mind. "It's just, I can't help but wonder if it's a good idea to invite her back to this country. To be fair, I don't think the so-called Dragon King is still that much of a threat to her anymore," Naruto pointed out with a chuckle. "Moreover, if he decides to make a move against her, then I can always deal with him myself, even though I doubt he's actually that stupid." "I trust your judgment, master." Sayla nodded her head to him and said, making Naruto smile before she decided to ask, "What about Irene-sama, master? Will you be inviting her as well?" "Not this year, unfortunately." Naruto shook his head and answered the question. "The lost members of Fairy Tail have returned, including her daughter, who's probably going to partake in the upcoming magic tournament with her guildmates. Irene's still pretty sensitive about the subject of her daughter, so it's best that I don't invite her here and bring it up. Moreover, you know what is worse than a catfight?" Naruto asked, but he did not wait for Sayla to answer the question as he did so himself. "Dragon. The more Irene and Celine don't see each other, the better for me and you." "Yes, I understand, master. Now, please excuse me." Sayla smiled and lowered her head to him before standing up from her seat to return to the shop and start with the preparation. Before she could go, however, Naruto grabbed her hand and pulled Sayla back to him, making her turn around and bend over for him to lean up and kiss her. Their lips met and Sayla was slightly taken aback by her master's action, but soon she began to kiss him back just as eagerly. "Rest assured that I won't let Celine pick on you while she's staying with us," Naruto said as he ended the kiss with his beloved demon servant, making her smile at him gratefully. With a grin, Naruto then let go of her hand, allowing Sayla to stand up and told her with a gesture of his head into the shop, "Now, be a dear and go grab my toolbox for me." "Yes, master." With that, Sayla headed back into the shop, leaving Naruto to sit there by himself and watch as the townspeople in the marketplace continued on with their daily life. Aqua Era was a complicated, but powerful magic that allowed the user to open portals and use them to travel freely between dimensions. Naruto did not know how to cast this magic. Although it was not because he did not know how, it was simply because he had never bothered himself with learning it. Simply put, he was far too lazy to learn something that complicated, and especially not when he had a dozen different items in his shop that could do the same thing and give the same results. One of those items he had taken apart and built into his all-purpose tool, a special wand-like magic device that he mostly used for magic-related works, from creating new magic items of small scales at his workshop to crossing dimensions like what he was doing, after detecting that Selene's magic signature was no longer on Earthland, but a world called Elentier. No wonder why she likes it here, Naruto said, as he put one hand over his forehead and looked at the full moon on the sky that shone so much brighter and was much more beautiful than the moon on Earthland. Despite not visiting other worlds besides Earthland that often, Naruto had heard a lot about Elentier from Selene in the past, so he knew that the moon of this world did not wax or wane, allowing it to stay a full moon at all times. Naruto had also heard about its condition. For who knew how long had it been, Elentier had been facing a problem where the magic essence of their world has expanded so much that it was on the verge of erupting, leading its inhabitants to employ priestesses also known as whiteout mages, those who had the ability to restrict magic using their own magic power, to erase the overabundant magic in the air and check and prevent it from going off and destroying the entire world. This was something that they had to do several times every year, and had been going on for many generations. Though, Naruto was sure that it was caused by the creature that was sealed under the ground of Elentier. Since he had never bothered to learn about the history of this world, or any other world that he had visited in the past, to begin with, Naruto had zero clue what it was, and also no intention of finding out, but he could tell whoever made the seal that was keeping it at bay had done a very poor job at it. Now, where in the hell are you, Selene? Putting his all-purpose tool away, Naruto then took out a compass-like device and used it to look for Selene. The needle was spinning like crazy because of the overwhelming magic essence in the air, but nothing a little adjustment couldn't fix since he already knew the problem. Before he could do anything to his Selene compass, as he would like to call it, a hulking figure shot out from behind Naruto and hit him on the back of his head, knocking him out before the blonde could even turn his head around to look at them. Selene-sama was right. It appears that we have an intruder from another world. The one who had knocked Naruto out, appearing to be a massive, muscular woman wearing a ripped-sleeved karategi outfit, spoke to her partner as she walked over to stand at her side and looked down at the unconscious man lying motionless on the ground beneath their feet. Although he looked like he wasn't going to wake up anytime soon, giving her fist a glance, the hulking woman couldn't help but feel a strange sense of dissatisfaction, unable to shake off the feeling that this man shouldn't have been knocked out that easily. At the same time, it might just be her imagination. What are we going to do with him now, Mimi? Her partner, a woman with fox-like facial features and dressed in a yukata, asked curiously as she poked Naruto on his chest, checking to see if his whisker marks were real or not. He looks a bit like a fox to me. Do you think that he is a yokai? Doesn't matter, Yoko Dono. Let's bring him back to Selene-sama. She will know what to do with him. Mimi shook her head and said firmly, making Yoko nod her head in agreement before stepping back and allowing her partner to pick the blonde up by his jacket and throw him on her shoulder like a sack of potatoes. Together, the two then made their ways back to the top of the mountain, where a three-story temple-like palace with multiple eaves stood while the moon casted its light over it. Making their way past a group of female guards, Mimi and Yoko eventually reached a room widely open to an area that was surrounded by large rocks, cherry trees, round lanterns and a pair of an Eastern dragon fountain statues. All of these were centered by a beautiful hot spring, where an incredibly beautiful and voluptuous woman, with very large and long blonde hair extending to her hips was taking a bath, a small smile on her face as she had her eyes closed. Selene-sama. Yoko spoke to the blonde, addressing her in a respectful manner as she bent over at the waist to bow to her. We have captured the intruder and brought him here before you. Finally decided to come find me, I see. Selene smiled and opened her eyes to glance at Naruto as Mimi put him down the rocky ground before her, chuckling a little in amusement before giving an order to her female attendants who were standing around the hot spring. Girls, strip him and tie him up for me. Giggling, the girls did what she told them to, gathering around Naruto to strip him of his clothing until only his orange and black stripes boxers was left on his strong, muscular body, which caused a number of them to marvel at the sight until they noticed Celine giving them a look, still with the smile on her face. Turning back to follow the order they had been given, the female attendants then shackled his wrists together and hung him up before Celine using a long rope that extended down from the ceiling of the room as she simply continued to sit in the hot spring and enjoy her bath. "It's done, Celine-sama," a female attendant informed as she and the others stepped back from Naruto, leaving him hanging there before them in nothing but his boxers with his hands raised by the wrists about his head, his feet standing by his toes on the floor of the room that he was in. "Splendid. Go tell the others to prepare a feast for us. We are going to have some fun tonight," Celine then said, making the girl lower her head in understanding before leaving. "With all my respect for you, Celine-sama," Mimi spoke to Celine as she stepped forward, "as much as I would be honored to attend this party with you and everyone, I think I will have too." "Who said anything about me having this party with you?" Celine interrupted nonchalantly, causing Mimi to widen her eyes in surprise as the blonde rose to her feet and made her way out of her bath. A pair of female attendants then rushed to her sides and began to dry her up using exquisite cloths, not stopping until not a single droplet of water left on her body before another pair stepped forward and offered to dress her up in a white kimono, which she allowed them to wrap loosely around her body before walking away without letting them close and secure it around her body with a black sash. Taking several long strides toward the man being hung by his wrists in the room before her, Celine eventually came to standing directly in front of him, one hand placing on the salacious curve of her wide, womanly hip as she bent over a bit to gaze up at his face. "Drop the childish act already. I know that you are awake." The moon dragon god then spoke to him much to the shock of her attendants and bodyguards, especially Mimi who had knocked him out with her own fist, and then flicked a finger at the shackles around his wrists, sending out a crescent blade of moonlight that cut the small chain holding them together. As both of his arms dropped to his sides, Naruto continued to remain firmly on his feet, alerting the attendants and the two moonlit divinities but not Celine, who nibbled on her bottom lip anticipatedly as he opened his eyes and looked at her. It was at that moment that Mimi and Yoko realized he had let them capture him, so that he would not have had to look for Celine himself and had them bring him to their mistress themselves. "I am not judging, but is this how you welcome your guests?" he asked, turning his gaze down even further to eye Celine's naked body, and the generous cleavage that she was flashing him. "If you mean stripping the men up and hanging them in this room, then yes." Answering him with a playful nod, Celine then stood straight up and opened her kimono, letting it slip down even further from her arms and hang loosely around her elbows as she unabashedly showed all of herself to Naruto, making him grin at her in approval before continuing, while her attendants could only watch on in surprise. "But you also get to have this for extra." "Celine-sama, watch out!" Yoko cried out in alarm as she and Mimi got ready to defend their mistress when Naruto, with an amused chuckle, reached out with one arm and wrapped it around her body to pull her to him, but stopped when the two saw that Celine did not resist, even as her body pressed firmly against his and his hand slipped down from her waist to grope at her ass. With a playful laugh and her large S piling against his chest, the moon dragon god then leaned up, and did the one thing that they would never imagine her doing to any man. She kissed him, and he returned it just as hard. "And that too," Celine said, finishing her early statement with a smug grin as she looked at Naruto as he reclined against the pile of rubbles of the collapsed wall. As she had expected, but to her attendants and underlings' shock, he did not have a scratch on his body despite having his boxers shredded to pieces in her moonlight blast. "I guess I deserve that one, huh?" The blonde grinned while casually dusting his hair, chuckling a bit in amusement when he sat up and saw the look of utter shock and confusion her bodyguards and attendants were wearing on their faces. "Nice place, by the way. Better than whatever rat hole that you chose to set up your little magic shop in these days, that's for sure." Celine replied with a roll of her eyes and walked over to the large window on the other side of the room to take her seat there on the window frame, not bothering to cover herself up with Naruto doing the same as he stood up and walked over to her, his long, girthy shaft lurching unabashedly in the open after he had torn off what's left of his boxers. "Leave us." Glancing over to Mimi and Yoko, Celine spoke to them, making them look unsurely at her for a moment before bowing their heads to her and hurriedly making their ways out of the room, leaving Celine behind with Naruto and a number of female attendants, who whispered among one another while eyeing the two as Celine turned back to him, asking, "So, to what do I owe the pleasure of this visit? And by the way, where is that little demon who always follows you around like a lost puppy? Her name is Sayla, in case you have forgotten. And also, your underlings would have ripped each other's head off if I had decided to bring her with me." Naruto pointed out as he stood over Celine and glanced down at her with his right elbow resting on the window frame above her head. "Wouldn't that be a sight to see?" Celine said, chuckling in amusement as she hid her smile behind the right sleeve of her kimono. "Indeed, even together all three of my moonlit divinities won't stand a chance against someone who has been with you for so long like her. But a fight between our servants would have been quite entertaining to watch together, don't you think? It's actually the reason why I am here today. I want to invite you back to Earthland to watch something with me," Naruto told her, making Celine turn her head up to look at him in interest. "I don't know if you heard, but the Kingdom of Fury in Earthland will be hosting an annual Grand Magic Tournament in 2 months, where the top magic guilds of the kingdom will fight against one another for the title of the strongest. It's going to be really interesting this year, so I wonder if you will be free for the next few months to come back to Earthland and watch it with me." "Huh, so you are saying that it's not because you want me back to act as the cover girl for your magic shop so you might draw in more customers during this grand magic event?" Celine asked as she crossed her arms under her S and leaned back to look up at him. "Ah, well, if that's the case, I assume that I am not your first choice either, am I?" "Nope, you are my first choice. When I thought about this year's Grand Magic Games, I thought about how awesome it would be to watch it with you." Naruto grinned charmingly and gave Celine a thumb up, making the blonde snort lightly but did not say anything, knowing him too well to try getting the whole truth from him. "But of course, if you also want to help me with my business then I won't stop you. Feels like that stupid shop of yours is all that you can think about these days." Celine scoffed lightly as she shot her hand out and seized his shaft, holding it firmly in her hand before she began to stroke him, starting slow but picking up the pace gradually. "But oh well, at least I will have something to do while you keep me entertained as we wait for the event to start." "Then you accept my invitation then?" Naruto asked with an approving grin on his face. "Only if you can beat me." Saying that, Celine pushed him back and stood up to make her way around him to get to the center of the room, dragging her kimono with her on the floor as it continued to hang on her body by the elbows. "You still remember our terms, right? If you win, I will do what you want. In this case, I will follow you back to Earthland and watch this human tournament with you. But if you win, then I will kill the other dragon gods for you," Naruto stated, nodding his head with a small smirk, not feeling surprised in the slightest by her challenge because they had done this before. Several times in fact, in the past. Celine was a dragon and above all she loved to be entertained. This fight between them was simply a means to spice things up between them in her way. The way of the dragons, where one would only submit to the other if they dominated them. She knew better than anyone no matter how strong she got she would never be able to beat him, which was also the reason why she had never changed the term on her side of their bet, knowing full well that her lover would make quick work of the other 4 dragon gods. "You sure you don't want this fight to be won in the bedroom? We both know you have a much better chance at winning there than here, you know." Naruto then continued with a taunting smile, crossing his arms on his chest as he kept his gaze on Celine. "Oh, don't worry, we will have that later in my room. We will decide if I will have to work for you at your shop during my stay in Earthland or not there," Celine answered while smiling fearlessly at him, making Naruto whistle in anticipation. "I have the servants preparing a feast for us as we speak, so you will have until then to prevail over me." "Alright, that sounds more like a challenge," Naruto said as he hooked his right arm around his left to stretch his back and shoulders. "Getting ready. One question before we begin? Can I at least put my clothes on first?" "No," was the only answer that Naruto got from his dragon god lover before she let out a snarl and began to transform into her dragon form, causing the moon of Alentir to increase tremendously in size and brightness, forcing her attendants to cover their eyes while realizing that their mistress had decided to unleash her full power right from the start. Shrugging off the overwhelming pressure Celine was emitting like it was nothing, Naruto then cracked his neck and shot toward her, instantly appearing in front of the surprised moon dragon god with the speed she could never hope to fathom. With a wide grin, the blonde then grabbed his dragon lover by her face and moved them both to a different location, leaving behind only a flash of yellow before blowing up the entire room and knocking the attendants to the ground with the shockwave caused by his insane speed alone. "Thank you for your purchase. Please come again," Sayla said nonchalantly, while forcing herself to bow her head out of politeness to a customer who was taking his leave from the shop with a newly purchased magic staff, which enabled him to cast fire spells without needing to do it himself, exhausting his own magic. The staff was among the most common items of her master's shop, so it did not have any particular negative drawbacks, with the only exception being its own limited magic core. Unlike her master, Sayla did not usually sell the customers any cursed magic artifacts whenever he was out and she was watching the shop for him. It was mostly because her knowledge of the items they had in the shop came from the catalog that Naruto had made for her, so even if she wanted some human to get cursed or even kill themselves with the items that they purchased from Uzumagi, it's hard for her to find the correct ones to sell to them. At the very least, by the time that her master returned he would be happy that they finally had a customer after almost an entire week of having none. Not that she had any complaints. She had a lot of preparation work to do to prepare for their departure to Crocus in a few days, so the fewer humans she had to deal with, especially the ones who entered just to browse and not buy anything, the better. Making her way back into the shop, Sayla suddenly felt a familiar presence approaching and turned back around to see her master Naruto Uzumaki emerging from the crowds of people gathering around the marketplace, with the woman she wanted to see the least in this world walking by his side. "Sayla, hey," Naruto called while waving his hand to Sayla, who turned fully around to properly greet her master. "Master, welcome back," she said with a small smile, bending over at the waist and bowing her head to her master when he arrived before her with Celine, who had an amused smile on her face as Sayla raised her head to greet her in a formal manner, face devoid of any positive emotion. "Celine-sama. Good to see you again too, Silas. It's Sayla, Celine-sama." "Yes, you as well," Celine said simply and smugly as she pushed open the door and walked into the shop, her hand removing the clip keeping her sash tied around her waist and letting it drop on the floor before her kimono followed suit. "I'm gonna go take a shower." "Where is the bathroom anyway?" "Second floor, on the right-hand side," Naruto answered, getting a meaningful wink from Celine as she glanced at him from over her shoulder before she finally dropped her kimono on the floor and took the stairs leading up to the second floor of the building, leaving Naruto to enter the shop with Sayla a moment later, him quickly picking up her kimono before a customer could walk in and see it. "My apology for saying this, master, but I really don't like that dragon." Sayla spoke blankly, making Naruto chuckle in amusement and reach out with one hand to pat his demon servant comfortingly on her bare shoulder, making Sayla lower her head to him in appreciation before returning to her work. As much as he would love to personally lend Sayla a hand, a shower with Celine wasn't something that he could easily turn down, no matter how much they had had in Elentier. Fortunately for all three of them, the key word here had always been, personally. "Would you like to talk about what's in your mind right now, Celine-sama?" Sayla asked nonchalantly, finally having enough of the awkward silence between her and Celine and being stared at the whole time by the blonde dragon god woman, who sat on the seat opposite her with one leg crossing over the other, her head being propped up on one elbow and an amused, somewhat smug smile on her face. At the moment, the two of them were currently sitting inside the shop's carriage together as it traveled on a sandy road leading to Crocus, having finished with the preparation that morning and decided to leave for the flower-booming capital of Fury to see the Grand Magic Games. Now, while the event was still about a month away, Naruto believed that it would be for them to go to Crocus early and build up some reputation, since a lot of mages from different magic guilds all around the kingdom had already gotten there to prepare for the largest magic event of the year, not to mention that there were a lot of people living in Crocus knew how to use magic as well. "I don't know. With that attitude, you don't strike me as a good listener," Celine answered simply, not taking her eyes off of Sayla as she finally stopped looking out of the window to meet her gaze. "You don't know me that well, Celine-sama." "Oh, but I think I do. After all, I know that among those who your master has shared an intimate relationship with, I am your least favorite." Celine spoke with a shrug of her shoulders, and Sayla's expression barely shifted as she allowed the woman to continue, not feeling surprised in the slightest that Celine knew she didn't like her. "And to be honest, I don't really mind. You would have been so boring to interact with otherwise." "I'll take that as a compliment, Celine-sama," Sayla replied, with a slight hint of sarcasm evident in her perfectly calm tone. Before they could say anything more to each other, someone knocked on the side of the carriage before Naruto's voice could be heard. "Sayla, is Celine picking on you in there?" "She's not, Naruto-sama." Sayla answered back, leaning her head a bit out of the window to her left to talk to Naruto, who was currently driving the carriage for them. "You don't have to worry about it." "Alright then." With that, Sayla leaned back into the carriage and closed the window so that her master wouldn't be able to hear their conversation if he wasn't paying attention. When she turned back to Celine, the dragon godwoman was staring at her again, this time with a teasing smile on her face as she reached her hand out and closed the window on her side of the carriage as well. "You know," Celine began, as she tapped her finger on the spot beside her head, where Naruto was sitting on the other side as he drove the carriage. "I always find it funny that you always address his shadow clones as Naruto-sama, while you call him master." Indeed, the one currently driving the carriage outside was only a clone of Naruto, as the original himself had decided to go on ahead of them to Crocus the previous night to meet with the agents of the real estate agency that he knew to talk to them about the place that they would be staying and setting up Uzumagi at, having contacted them a couple of days ago via magic mail. Apparently, the building that the agency was able to provide them was located at the residential district of Crocus, near the inns and hotel where all the magic guilds would be staying for the entire duration of the tournament. Because of this reason alone, there would be no better place for them to sell their merchandise while staying in Crocus and watching the Grand Magic Games. "Do you have a problem with how I address Master and his clones, Celine-sama?" Sayla then asked, crossing her arms under her bust as she lowered her gaze down. Celine might be a dragon god, one of the most powerful beings in the world, but that did not mean she had to be afraid of her. She had never felt fear whenever she looked at this woman, because she did not come to know Celine as the dragon god she had become, but the weak and pathetic little moon dragon her master took pity on back when they first met. "No, it's just that in human custom, I am technically his wife, so shouldn't you be calling me master, or mistress as well?" Celine pointed out with a small smirk, reaching out for the bottle of wine on the table next to her and fill her glass. "Wine? Not in a million years, Celine-sama. And no, thank you," Sayla replied nonchalantly before declining her offer. "Oh, it's not a problem then. I can wait," Celine replied with another shrug, giggling amusedly while hiding her smile behind the sleeve of her white kimono before she began to pleasantly enjoy the drink she had brought along with her for the trip. Sayla could only sigh, knowing full well that this was how it was going to be for the next few weeks, or at least until Celine decided to go somewhere to do her own things again, which could usually take years or even centuries depend on the woman's mood swings. It would surely take her some time to get used to Celine's antics again, and it's definitely not going to be any easier than the last time. Dragons, by nature, were extremely possessive of what they considered theirs, especially female dragons like Celine, so it's hard for Sayla to determine if the woman was just messing with her to entertain herself, as usual, or she did it because she did not want her mate for life cared too deeply for anyone but her. One thing that Sayla knew for sure though, Celine definitely did not consider her a competition, or at least, not as much as Irene Belsirian. Having been traveling for 3 hours then, it did not take it long for them to arrive in Crocus after that, with Mercurius Castle and Domus Flow, the battle arena hosting the games of the Grand Magic Tournament being the first to come into view. Just as they had expected, while the event was still a whole month away, the streets of Crocus were already crowded with the visitors and mages who had arrived prematurely for the Grand Magic Games from all around the kingdom. At the same time, the citizens of Crocus themselves seemed to have already gotten started on making some early preparations for the tournament, decorating the city with flowers their city was named after and hanging the flags and logos of the upcoming event, as well as banners bearing the crests of the magic guilds that they supported in front of their homes. "Hey boss," the clone shouted, waving his hand in the air to the original Naruto when he finally spotted the blonde standing waiting for them in front of a 3-story tall building with the Uzumagi neon sign panel on the front. "Ah, you guys made it." Naruto turned his head and spoke with a wide grin, as the carriage parked perfectly in front of him on the driveway of his new shop before he reached his hand out to pat one of the giant bird-like creatures, pulling it gently on its neck while continuing to talk to his clone, who looked at him. "Didn't run into any trouble, I hope?" "Nope, nothing was on our way, boss." The clone answered with an assuring grin and then jumped off the driver's seat to walk around the carriage and start unloading the packages from the luggage compartment in the back, letting Naruto walk over to the door and open it, offering his hand to a smiling Celine with a charming smile of his own. "Milady. My, what a gentleman." Celine giggled, as she took his hand and got out of the carriage with him leading her. Giving his dragon lover a grin, Naruto then turned his attention over to Sayla and offered his hand to his demon servant, making her smile and reach her own hand out for him. But before Naruto could take her hand, Celine grabbed him by the collar of his shirt and pulled him back to her, smashing her lips against his. The moment the two of them came face to face, her tongue lashing out into his mouth as she kissed him aggressively. Despite being taken by surprise, it did not take it long for Naruto to start kissing her back, even as he took Sayla's hand and led her out of the carriage while she rolled her eyes at Celine, who glanced smugly over to her for a second before the blonde fully turned her attention back to make out with Naruto. Eventually, after a long moment while Sayla stood there and stared on, the pair finally parted, with Celine releasing the collar of Naruto's shirt and letting him lean back before she spoke to him in a firm tone, as if daring him to try and argue with her. "Next time, I will use my power to travel." With that said, Celine pushed Naruto back lightly from her with a finger to his chest, before she walked on ahead and entered the sparkling clean building, which Naruto had pretty much finished setting up, with the only exception being the lack of items and magical merchandises, which were all stored inside the chests and packages his clone was unpacking from the carriage. "So much for trying to get you two to bond, huh?" Naruto asked, crossing his arms on his chest as he leaned to the side and nudges Sayla gently on her arm with his elbow. "You two had fun traveling together?" he then asked her, even though the answer to his question was quite obvious. But of course, Sayla would never want to disappoint him, so she gave him the answer that summed up her whole trip with Celine in the most positive outlook. "I will not call it fun, master, but we did get to know each other a bit more." "Oh well, I guess it's still better than nothing." Chuckling softly in amusement, Naruto then wrapped his arm around Sayla's shoulder and gave her a soft kiss on the side of her head, making her look up at him with a smile before the two of them made their way into their new home together, leaving his clone behind to handle the rest of the prep works for the shop's grand opening in Crocus tomorrow's morning. "Hey Celine, come, let me give you and Sayla a house tour." Naruto called out to Celine, who was checking out Naruto's mini workshop on the left side of the main room. "Got something I want to show you." "Sure, lead the way then." With that said, Celine went with Sayla and Naruto as the blonde began to show them around the house, first bringing them to their rooms on the second floor of the building, as the entire first floor was occupied by the sales areas of the shop, the storeroom and Naruto's personal workshop. Naruto wasn't entirely sure how much Celine and Sayla would need for their personal spaces, but they could surely use the room to store their personal belongings. But it was just as he had expected, both Sayla and Celine preferred to stay with him in the master bedroom on the third floor. It was the largest room in the house, with a massive, king-sized bed that would give him all the spaces that he needed for their bedroom activities on one side of the room, and a high-end bathroom on the other, featuring a luxury built-in bathtub and a clear panel shower room, both of which were large enough to host multiple people at the same time, and separated from the main bathroom by glass wall and doors. Of course, being someone who would take a bath at least 3 to 4 times a day, Celine was the most pleased by this. Not that she would have any problem just opening a portal and going back to her palace in Elentier for her hot spring bath, but she could easily imagine herself spending most of her time there during her stay in Earthland with him. "Well, I am sure that I could have done a bit more for you, but since we are only going to..." Naruto explained to Celine while looking around the room, but was stopped when he heard the ruffling sounds of clothes being removed and turned his head to see his dragon god lover stripping in front of him, first taking off her sash before opening her kimono, which she then allowed to slip itself down her voluptuous body, leaving herself standing completely naked before him, her smooth, flawless white skin on full display while her enormous S stood high and firm on her chest with gravity-defying weight, wobbling slightly with the slight movements of her body. "We gotta do something about that stripping habit of yours, even if you are going to take a bath. You are always welcome to just stand outside and watch, by the way." Celine replied simply, as she stepped into the shower and turned the shower on to a hot setting, not having to wait for the water to heat up to step under the warm spray. "Sayla," Naruto called, while not taking his eyes off of Celine, who was standing with his back to him. "Yes, master," Sayla said, looking up from the book she was checking out. It was just the type of book that she loved to read in her free time, being written in demonic script, the language of demons. Naruto had also prepared for her an entire shelf of them next to the bed, so she could take them and read anytime she wanted. "Can you please go downstairs and lend my clone a hand?" Naruto asked, and Sayla was more than happy to comply. With a bow of her head to Naruto while holding the book in her hands against her chest, Sayla then made her way out of the room, taking her leave for the ground floor to do as her master wanted, but not before giving one last glance to Celine, who did the same just as her master began to take his clothes off to join his dragon god lover under the shower. "Ladies, gentlemen, boys and girls, please, come and gather around." Celine spoke loudly, her arms outstretched to the sides like a performer as she called out to the people walking around on the street outside of the magic shop, drawing their attention. With her beauty, mesmerizing attractiveness and an overall incredibly positive attitude, it did not take long for a sizable crowd of people to gather around her, growing in size with each and every second, allowing her to continue, "Welcome to Uzumagi Magic Shop. It's our grand opening day. Are you looking for a sturdy set of armor that will protect you from any attack, or a powerful weapon that can let you strike down even the mightiest foes with ease? Are you looking for a cute little pet that will faithfully follow you on your journey to become the strong mage like the Canis Minor celestial spirit, the Nakora? Are you looking to become the next magic emperor and rule the world? If the answer to these questions is yes, then you have come to the right place. Here at Uzumagi, we sell the best magic items and artifacts in the world. Items that cannot be found anywhere else. Items that you don't even know exist and don't know how much you need them until you learn about them. We have everything that you can possibly imagine. You name it, we have it at the fairest and most reasonable prices. For the common folks and those of you who aren't mages, don't go anywhere just yet. If you are looking to bring some magical excitement into your daily life or help yourself with the boring and tedious household chores, then we also got you covered. Many of our items here run on its own magical cores, meaning that even if you cannot use magic, you will still be able to use them. For those who wish to become a full-fledged mage, then we also have a wide selection of beginner magic books and spell tomes that you can choose from and get the basic down before choosing your own magic. Just like any magic shops out there, we also offer maintenance services to old and damaged items, but better. If you are not looking to replace your beloved weapons and armors that are broken and severely damaged with something else new and better, then you can still bring them to us and we will have them fixed and restored in no time. There's nothing that we cannot fix, or make look as good as new. For our grand opening day, we are also giving away special discounts to the first 20 customers and coupons to all those who are standing here. Celine announced cheerily before gesturing her hand to the side and signaling Sayla, who had been standing there waiting, to step forward and start giving discount coupons to the excited people standing before them. To these people, the only thing that was better and made their day livelier than a beautiful and voluptuous woman, was two of them. Even if the second one looked like she would murder them right on the spot if they dared to touch her. "Now, go check out our merchandise before they are taken by someone else," Celine declared as she grabbed a stack of discount coupons from Sayla and threw them, allowing the winds to scatter them out in the air and making the overly excited people fight one another for one. After that, it did not take it long for them to head into the shop and start browsing the items in store as Naruto opened the door for them while drinking a cup of coffee, having been watching from the moment Celine stepped onto the mini-stage that he had set up for her in front of the shop. This was exactly the reason why Celine had always been the cover girl of his shop, simply because Sayla could never draw in customers the same way she could. She had absolutely no problem communicating with humans, simply because she liked them and held them in high regard, unlike Sayla, who disliked humans and found them all annoying. It was in her nature as a demon, and even if he ordered her to, she could never put on a bright smile and a positive attitude to talk to their customers the same way Celine could, because of her firm belief that no one but him deserved to have them from her. And so began the first 2 weeks of their business in Crocus. With her silver tongue and beauty, it wasn't hard for Celine to persuade their customers into buying something from them, even if they originally did not have anything in mind when they first entered the shop. Though Naruto couldn't help but feel that she gave a bit too much information and instructions to these people for them to run into trouble or mess up using the items, but that was something he could easily work on with her over time. Magic swords and armors were without a doubt among the best-selling items of the shop, but they were nothing compared to the popularity of his maintenance services at his workshop, which was where nothing could go wrong. A couple of cursed items had also made its way out of the shop in the hands of some unsuspected customers, and Naruto couldn't help but crack a sly smile knowing that he would be hearing from them very soon. Alright, I guess we are done for today, Naruto announced as he made his way back into the shop after bidding goodbye to the last group of customers. They did not have that many customers that day, but there were still more than enough to keep all three of them quite busy and Celine herself slightly entertained. You girls think we should go out for dinner tonight? I heard there was a really good restaurant that just opened not too far from here. Sure, if that's what you want, master, Celine and Sayla answered before they both followed Naruto out of the shop after he had turned off the light. But before they could go anywhere, the three found themselves being surrounded by a group of mages, who quickly gathered and stood around them in a tight formation, each one wearing a white and light blue robe with the white ankh-like symbol of the Magic Council on their chest and wielding in their hands magic staves with the same symbols. Standing before the group guarding the entrance in front of them were two men. The first, who appeared to be the higher-ranking officer, had long, tied-up black hair. His attire was that of a high-ranking council associate, consisting of a long, blue jacket with pink edges and strapped cuffs over a high-collared shirt bearing the same symbol his soldiers had. His attire also featured white pants held up by a simple belt, white gloves, a white cape held closed by a gem-decorated buckle, and distinctive shoes, seemingly bearing a serpentine pattern. The second, meanwhile, was a lean-built man of average height with short black hair and a small goatee below his mouth. He had large, bright emerald turquoise eyes and thin eyebrows, and three distinctive scars on the left side of his face. His attire was almost identical to his partner, being the uniform for high-ranking member of the Magic Council, consisting of a dark jacket, with light-colored edges and a pair of buttoned bands on each sleeve, worn over a lighter shirt bearing the dark ankh-like symbol, mildly loose, light pants held up by a simple belt, similarly colored gloves and shoes, and a light cape held in place by a rhomboidal buckle adorned by a gem. You are not going anywhere, Naruto Uzumaki, the man said as he gazed directly at Naruto, who had a smile on his face as he looked around the area. Is there a problem, officer? Naruto asked, grinning innocently as he held up a hand and stopped Sayla to step forward. He knew Celine loved to watch when things like this happened, so she wouldn't do anything rash until he did it first, so Sayla was the only one he needed to worry about. You can stop acting innocent, Naruto Uzumaki, the head captain of the custody enforcement unit, Lahar, spoke as he maintained his eyes on the blonde. We know who you are and what you are doing. Today we are going to bring you into custody. Oh, do you now, Officer Lahar? Naruto asked, chuckling in amusement as he took out his all-purpose tool and began to adjust it accordingly to his need by pressing the small buttons on the side. What have I done to deserve a whole troop of Magic Council's Rune Knights to come for me like this? He asked, glancing up and smirking a bit when he saw Lahar's partner, whose name he knew very well was Mest Grider, widened his eyes slightly when he saw, and probably somewhat remembered, the tool he was holding in his hand. The past few days, you have been selling dangerous, unregistered magical artifacts illegally to the mages who have entered your shops. Lahar spoke, his tone growing frustrated due to the causal air Naruto was emitting. On June 15, you sold Nishi Hoka a pair of glasses that shows him the answer of every question and knowledge beyond comprehension, but it makes him lose his mind. You mean he's turned into a retarded? Naruto asked, chuckling, a small price to pay for uncomprehended knowledge, don't you think? You think it's funny? Nishi-san was a respectable researcher of magic. It would take months for him to recover. Lahar shot back in frustration, but Naruto simply brushed it off. Do you know what is even worse? Just the day after, you sold his neighbor Jack Steady a pair of running shoes that let him run faster than any speed magic mage, but he can never stop running. We had to. The man said he wanted to run faster, so I sold him the shoes. Isn't that problem solved? Naruto interrupted Lahar before shrugging his shoulders. Okay, hearing reports from you lots are getting lame to me now. Let's sort this one out fast so we can all return to our daily life, shall we? What are you? You think this is the first time we have had this conversation? Naruto asked, chuckling as he pulled out a pair of dark sunglasses and put it on, with Sayla raising her left arm up to use the sleeves of her kimono to cover her face, making Celine do the same out of curiosity. Nah. It's actually every time I go to a big city like this and advertise my merchandise a bit too far. I guess Mest is getting a bit better at his memory magic, isn't he? He asked, looking at Mest before holding up the tukul in his hand. Now, Can you all please look here? No, Mest cried out, having fully remembered what he was about to do, look away now. But it was too late. Not today. But fortunately for them, before Naruto could press the button and erase their memories with a flash of red light, someone cried out triumphantly and shot down from a nearby building to land before Naruto and snatched the all-purpose tool from his hand, appearing to be a tall and well-built man with medium length, wavy and spiked orange hair that jutted out at the top in a shape similar to rabbit ears. His outfit was a fanciful white robe with blue long sleeves, a blue belt and blue pants. His chest and neck area were covered by a small red cloak with white-colored edges, a large collar and 3 yellow-colored crescent shapes lined up vertically on both sides over his chest. He also wore a simple pair of boots that reached below his knees and a large wheel of blades on his back resembling a dharma wheel, giving him the superficial resemblance of a divine figure. God Serena-sama, Mest blurted out in shock and relief, recognizing the man not just for his unique look but also powerful aura of magic. Judging from the looks on the Rune Knights' faces, Naruto could tell that God Serena, the man who was ranked first in terms of strength among the 4 gods of Ishgar of the Wizard Saints, making him the strongest mage on the entire continent, was with them. Sorry pal. The man, who went by the name God Serena, spoke dramatically as he held his hand to the side to prevent Naruto from taking back his all-purpose tool. But I cannot let you do that, Toda. But suddenly, he stopped, his eyes widened slightly in surprise when he finally noticed that there was nothing in his hand. Looking for this? Taking off his sunglasses, Naruto asked casually while holding up his all-purpose tool that was still in his hand and waving it in the air to God Serena, who looked at him in shock. Instantly, the smile on God Serena's face disappeared and he jumped back to create some distance between himself and the blonde-haired man. As for a brief second, too quick for anyone but him to notice, he could feel an overwhelming presence coming from Naruto and being directed at him. It was unlike anything he had ever felt in his life, and it wasn't hard for him to acknowledge it as something that could crush his strength if he did not have so much pride and confidence in his own abilities. Can't believe that this evening is going to get so messy. Naruto murmured casually as he stepped forward, knowing that a mage of this caliber couldn't be easily fooled as the likes that were standing around them from the Magic Council. Celine, can you be a dear and watch over Sayla for me? I will take care of this as quickly as I can. This guy is not going to let me wipe his mind so easily like before. Sure, but you had to treat me to something delicious tonight when we are at that restaurant, you spoke up. Celine said, making Naruto chuckle before he fully turned his attention back to God Serena, who could feel a bead of sweat trickling down the side of his face as he gazed at the blonde, all the while smirking somewhat forcefully and nervously. Stand down, all of you. Before either of them could make a move, someone shouted, causing them all to turn their heads to see a man dressed in heavy-set armor stepping forward, while accompanying a slim, petite young woman. She had wavy light green hair that reached down to the middle of her back, and large dark green eyes with long eyelashes. Her outfit was a short dress that exposed her back and parted at the sides of the skirt, with a flower-like pattern along the line, and a pair of long gloves that covered up to her elbows with frills at the end of them. In addition, she also wore a fair amount of jewelry, mainly a tiara with 7 gemstones with the largest placed in the middle and the rest following on outwards, a large silver necklace with a large pendant and a pair of earrings with 2 large gems in both of them. The princess? Lahar and Mest uttered in shock, before he and the Rune Knights of the Magic Council got on their knees to bow to the Princess of Fury, being accompanied by the chief of the Cherry Blossom Holy Knight Squadron and a number of his guards. Well, this night is just getting better and better, isn't it? Naruto asked with an amused chuckle, but it wasn't because of the arrival of the Princess of Fury. While he knew that someone like her was the real deal, he was far more interested in the one that was following her and her guard. A man with a familiar face but with much longer hair, being tied in a high ponytail that reaches midway down his back. Additionally, rather than being completely black, his hair was now black on the right, and a much lighter color on the left. His face also now bore a jagged scar that went over his right eye and extended over the bridge of his nose, and a sharp, curved tattoo around his left eye. It was Rogue Cheney of Sabretooth, but at the same time, Naruto could tell that it's not quite him. My, how exciting! Celine giggled as she hid her amused smile behind the sleeve of her kimono. It appeared that she did not make a bad choice choosing to come to Earthland with her lover. So then, Who are you supposed to be? Naruto asked absently, as he scratched the side of his head with his all-purpose tool while looking at the rogue look-alike young man, who had a small smirk on his face as he stepped forward and stood beside the princess and her bodyguard, Rogue's long-lost twin brother. I am Rogue. 7 years from now. Rogue answered calmly, causing the god Serena, the two officers of the Magic Council and their rune knights to widen their eyes in shock while Celine simply continued to watch on in interest, her amused smile being shared by Naruto, who did not look surprised in the slightest. But you have already figured it out the moment you saw me, haven't you, Naruto-san? More like I don't want to believe that you are from the future. Naruto answered with a shrug of his shoulder before pointing his all-purpose tool at Rogue, making Princess Hisui's bodyguard step forward to stand protectively in front of her. The man probably thought the device Naruto was holding was a magic weapon. I mean, come on, look at your hairstyle. Don't tell me everyone in the future has that same shit on their head. Not the worst insults you have ever given me, but I will take that as a confirmation that you know I am from the future. Rogue said with a nod of his head. I expect nothing less from the devil salesman himself. So you are really from the future, and he's the one who can help us fix the Eclipse Gate? Hisui asked in a low tone, looking over to Rogue. Yes, he is. And also, Hisui-sama, you don't have to lower your voice. Regardless of what is going to happen tonight, he will wipe all of our memories. None of us here will remember having this conversation with him, including God Serena and the Rune Knights or even the Magic Council itself. Future Rogue stated, much to the shock of everyone who was listening as he crossed his arms on his chest, smirking knowingly while keeping his visible eye on the blonde. Am I right, Naruto-san? Here's the thing, kid. I don't like that you seem like you know a bit too much about me. Naruto said as he looked at Rogue with half-lidded eyes. So please, give me one good reason why I shouldn't just go ahead and neutralize your ass along with those idiots over there right now so we can all just move on in peace and I can take these two lovely ladies here out for dinner tonight. The blonde stated, as he threw a thumb over his shoulder to point at God Serena and the Rune Knights, before gesturing his hand to Celine and Sayla, turning his head to beam charmingly at them. Because you are the one who sent me back to this time period to save this country, Naruto-san. Future Rogue replied, making Naruto look back at him while arching an eyebrow at him in curiosity. And you are the only one who can help us fix the damaged Eclipse Gate to ensure that my mission is fulfilled. Let's forget about your mission for now. Whatever it is, the gate is damaged, you say? What happened to it? Naruto asked, rubbing his chin thoughtfully as he glanced between Rogue and the princess, having already figured out what's going on. Future Rogue appeared to be one hell of a liar, because if he weren't the best at the art of deceiving himself then he could never tell that the duo colored-haired shadow dragon slayer was blatantly lying to his face while arrogantly believing that he could fool him. As I said, you were the one who sent me back in time, by forcefully opening the gate with your power so I could cross over. Rogue answered with a small, knowing smile. However, even the gate couldn't handle that much raw power, so it was almost destroyed in the process. Regardless, because of the damage, it is not working the way we want it now and the only one who can fix it is you. What makes you think, in the future, you foresaw this problem and told me to go look for you in the past? It was you in the future that wanted you to fix the gate, Naruto-san. Rogue interrupted him, reasoning with the blonde calmly. You told me exactly where you were going to be tonight, and that's why we were able to come just in time to stop the Rune Knights from arresting you. Oh, so this is all my future self doing? Would love to meet the guy. He sounds awesome. Probably really smart too, Naruto said as he crossed his arms on his chest and smiled. He would have continued praising himself a bit more, if Celine had not coughed into her hand and interrupted him from feeding to his already oversized ego, simply because it was nothing new to her and she had grown bored of him doing it almost constantly in every conversation. So you will help us then, Uzumaki-san? Before Naruto could answer the cute princess's question with a charming smile, Lahar had stepped forward to stand beside God Serena, who had been simply standing there with his arms crossing on his chest and watching in silence, and spoke to Hisui in a respectful but firm tone, with Mest and his Rune Knights following closely behind him. I don't really know what is going on here and I am very sorry if I offend you, Hisui-sama, but we need to bring this man in tonight. It is the council's direct order. The bespectacled man spoke as he turned over to glare at Naruto, who gestured both hands dramatically at him. He's a dangerous person who has been selling illegal magic items to the people of your city, causing them harm and chaos wherever he goes. The Magic Council has been trying to track him down and arrest him so we might shut down his establishment, but every time we got close, he always managed to escape. Not that hard, let me tell you. Naruto pointed out with a finger in the air, smirking slyly before he looked at Lahar and spoke straight to his face. Man, you guys really suck, do you know that? Regardless, you will not be able to avoid your crime forever, Naruto Uzumaki. Ignoring his insult, Lahar continued to speak to him in a firm tone. We will shut your shop down and bring you in tonight. The chairman has given God Serena, who they personally sent to capture you, the permission to do whatever it takes to arrest you and shut down your establishment tonight. We will also take all the necessary evidence from your shop, and make sure that they will be locked away forever. Saying that, Lahar looked at his rune knights, making them nod their heads at him in understanding before turning their heads to rush over to the shop, each and every one of them ready to kick down the door to enter. Before they could do just that, Sayla had already stepped before them with a dark look on her face and a menacing aura about her that caused the knights to instantly back off in nervousness and even fear. The ground beneath her feet cracked and small pebbles started picking themselves up as Sayla's power began to rise, affecting everyone in the area but Naruto, Selene, God Serena and future Rogue. If you think that those old geezers sitting on top of your organization want to shut down my business because they want to lock away my stuff for good, then you are more naive than I thought you were, four-eyed. Naruto spoke to head captain of the Magic Council's custody enforcement unit with a small, amused chuckle and a shrug of his shoulder before continuing. Regardless, it appears that tonight is going to be a long-ass night, so why don't we quickly finish things here so we can all move on with our life? Saying that, Naruto then looked over to Hisui and requested her while rubbing his hands together. Princess, can you use some of that royal authority of yours and save me the trouble of having to deal with these guys right now? If you do, then I will help you fix the gate for free. Hisui looked quite troubled. On one hand, she knew that it wouldn't be right for her to stop the Rune Knights, not to mention that it would surely affect the royal family's image if she stopped them from carrying out their duties and arrest this man tonight. If he was really that infamous salesman who had been selling illegal and dangerous magical artifacts to unsuspected customers, making just as if not even more dangerous than Lahar had pointed out to her. Some even claimed that he was older and more powerful than Zarif himself, the darkest and most evil black mage in the world. Despite everything they knew about him so far were just rumors and probably make-up stories, which she had always found hard to believe. But at the same time, as she looked over to Rogue Chaney, the man who claimed to have traveled back in time to help save Fury from a threat that would go beyond her imagination, she realized that Naruto Uzumaki was their only chance to have the gate fixed in time. Although Hisui still didn't quite trust him, and knew she would have to wait till for some more time, at least till this year Grand Magic Games to really confirm if he was really from the future or not, one thing that she knew for sure was that the Eclipse Gate had indeed lost its magic and no one in Fury knew how to fix it. She had sent the best magicians and scholars from all over the country to study the gate the past few months and see if they could do anything about it, but no matter what they tried, the gate remained broken and non-functioned the way she would need it to. If this man from the future was indeed telling the truth, then her beloved country was done for if she could not get Naruto Uzumaki to fix it. How much time do you need to fix the gate? Hisui decided to ask him. I can build the exact same gate in a week, so fixing it will probably won't take that much time. Naruto answered casually with a shrug, making Hisui and her bodyguard Arcadios and the chief of the Cherry Blossom Holy Knight Squadron, who also knew about her plan, gasp in shock. However, I know where you are getting with this, princess. You want me to fix the gate for you and then you will hand me back to the four-eyed and his fools, aren't ya? I am sorry, but if you are a criminal then you had to be. I think you missed the point. Naruto interrupted the green-haired princess with a small chuckle and then continued, I asked if you could save me the trouble of having to deal with them now. It's just to get them off my ass while I work for you. When I am done, I will go back to deal with them and even the Magic Council itself. What makes you think that I am gonna let you? Before God Serena could even finish, Naruto had already spun around and grabbed him by his wrist, stopping him just before he could grab onto his shoulder. In a blink of an eye, the strongest wizard saint fell a hand grabbing him by the back of his head, before smashing him down face first into the ground. Grunting in pain, God Serena shot up, his magic power rising off the chart as he prepared to unleash his 8 Dragon Slayer magic, but widened his eyes when he found out that he was no longer in Crocus. All the houses around him had disappeared, and replaced with the tree of a forest. What the? Once again God Serena was interrupted before he could finish his sentence, this time by a flash of red light that he wasn't fast enough to react to. Almost instantly, his eyes glazed over and the man found himself freezing on the spot, entering a trance of some sort as he tried to recall the reason why he was standing in the middle of nowhere that night. What's going on? The orange-haired man couldn't help but ask himself before he started walking, wandering aimlessly through the forest that he was in, not knowing exactly where to go. Back in Crocus, Mest, Lahar and their rune knights were gasping in shock. One moment, the strongest wizard Saint God Serena was standing in front of them, reaching out for the man that they had come to apprehend that night, but the next, he no longer was, with only Naruto Uzumaki standing there with a small smirk on his face, as he turned his head and looked at them, causing some of the rune knights and even the 2 leaders themselves to back off instantly. What have you? Not barking so loudly now, are we? Naruto said, chuckling more to himself than at them while saying, I guess it's time for you lots to go lick someone else's boots, isn't it? Lahar could only grit his teeth tightly in frustration, but at the same time he knew that he had no other choice but to make the call to retreat, knowing that if Naruto had done something to God Serena with them not even being able to see it, then there's no way that they could do anything to Naruto. Not to mention, while he couldn't care less about the princess and the favor she was asking of the blonde, it was Naruto's companions that he was most worried about, as the woman with black hair looked ready to just go ahead and murder them all right on the spot. The worst thing was that he knew she possessed the strength to just do so easily. Mest, let's retreat for now. Lahar spoke up, with sweats trickling down the side of his face. Mest looked like he wanted to argue, but inwardly he knew that Lahar was making the correct decision. This is not over, Naruto Uzumaki. One day, we will. Bring me in and judge you for the crimes that you have committed, blah blah blah, same old shit. It's starting to get a bit too old now. Naruto interrupted, raising his hand and mockingly making the talking motion by repeatedly opening and closing his palm with his fingers pointing toward the Magic Council's troops before waving his hand dismissively at them. Now shoo. I think you have wasted enough of my time tonight already. And don't forget to use this time to consider how lucky you all are that I still bother myself with just wiping your memories instead of taking you all out to save myself the trouble of cleaning you up with a shovel afterwards. Naruto called after them as the 2 officers left with their rune knights, who felt a chill running down their spines when they heard those few last words of his. Well, at least we got that over with. Those humans weren't really as interesting as I thought they would be. Celine said as she walked toward Naruto with Sayla, who lowered her guard down as she stepped up to take her place next to her master. Don't you think it would be better for you to just kill them and save yourself the trouble of having to deal with them afterwards? To be fair, it is dealing with them that is the fun part. You will be surprised at how entertaining it can be to see what they can come up with the next time they show up, even though they always speak the same thing. Naruto said with a casual shrug of his shoulders, smiling at both Celine and Sayla before finally turning his attention to the royal delegation as they eyed him nervously, with the exception being the rogue from the future. Now bring me to the gate so I can get this night over with. Naruto told them simply, making the princess nod her head before turning around to lead them to a horse-drawn carriage, which then drove them to Mercurius Castle. The trip went on in silence and uneventful, with Naruto sitting in the back with Sayla and Celine, while Rogue sat by himself near the seat where the princess was sitting with her bodyguard. So, what exactly happened in the future that led me to send you back in time for this saving the world mission? Naruto asked as he walked alongside Rogue, with Sayla and Celine trailing closely behind him. The group was currently heading into the castle on foot, after leaving the carriage at the driveway of the castle. Dragons, Naruto-san, Rogue answered, and as he started explaining, Celine looked at him for the first time, her ears perking up in interest. In a few weeks, a horde of 10,000 dragons will attack this country and use it as a pedal stone to conquer the entire world in 7 years. Not even a tenth of the human population survived. You sent me back because you wanted me to help the people of this time stop those dragons before it was too late. Interesting stuff, Naruto said with a humorous chuckle, making Celine turn her head to look at him. She knew that laugh, but decided to not speak a word about it. So all I gotta do is to help you fix the gate then? What are you going to do with it? Using the magic power that has been stored inside the gate for the past 7 years, we can turn the gate into a weapon, the Eclipse Cannon. Please hold on a second, Naruto said, calling out loudly to stop Rogue and the rest of the group from advancing before turning over to Sayla and putting a hand on her bare shoulder. As his demon servant, Lover tilted her head to the side and looked at him curiously. She only saw him looking down with his other hand on his hip before he began to cough repeatedly, appearing to be choking to the others, but both she and Celine knew that he was trying to hold his laughter in. After a moment, Naruto looked up, patting his chest gently as he spoke to Rogue, who was looking at him curiously. Sorry. I choked on my own saliva. It happens sometimes. See? Rogue said unsurely, while Celine could only give him a look. Hisui and Arcadios soon started working again, and the four of them wasted no time to follow after them. So, the Eclipse Cannon. Great stuff, Naruto said, nodding his head sagely before continuing. What are you going to do with it? Are you going to fire it at the 10,000 dragons or something? That's exactly what we intended to do, Naruto-san. Rogue said, it's the only means this mortal have of defeating 10,000 dragons. Can't say that I am not looking forward to seeing a door firing a blast of magic. Wouldn't it be a sight to see? Naruto asked, leaning over to Sayla and asking her. The demon answered simply with a nod of her head. Rogue could only give Naruto a blank look before shaking his head, as if to clear a thought in his mind as he turned back to continue following Hisui and her bodyguard. Soon after that, the group arrived at their destination, a large hall located directly underneath the castle. As the giant door was opened for them by a group of guards, the Eclipse Gate finally came into view, standing gloriously but at the same time somewhat menacingly in the very center of the giant hallroom due to the strange residual ethernano it was emitting. Fascinating, Celine murmured as she gazed up at the gate in interest, having never seen a magic artifact of this scale and capability. Glancing over to her lover, she couldn't help but wonder if he was the one who actually built the gate, as he appeared to be the only one who could fix it. Turning away from him, the moon dragon god then looked down at her left hand and felt her magic power being drawn from her and absorbed into the gate at a slow but steady pace, which was just enough for her to feel it, and allowed her to come to the realization that a normal mage or even a juvenile dragon would be left completely exhausted of their magic reserve if they used magic within the gate's vicinity. Its cores had to be made of a strong magic-absorbing material, while the gate itself appeared to be made of maginium, an incredibly sturdy magic-resistant metal. Well, someone's definitely done some damage to it all right, Naruto said, stepping ahead of Hisui and Arcadios before either of them could say anything while looking at the gate. Taking out from his jacket a pair of glasses, Naruto then put them on and then walked over to climb onto the gate, his feet sticking onto the vertical surface as if it was the ground before using his all-purpose tool to pry open the panel below the moon symbol, revealing a mechanism Hisui and Arcadios didn't even know exist within the gate, with a large, but cracked crystal in the center. Don't need this anymore, Naruto said casually as he removed the crystal and tossed it over his head to the side, bringing out a crystal that looked exactly the same as the one he had just thrown away. The moment that the cracked crystal hit the floor, however, it exploded violently, catching the other people in the room off guard and knocking almost them all down, with the exception being Celine, who instantly raised a barrier to protect herself and Sayla from the blast, while future Rogue looked quite shocked himself. Hey, could you have been more careful? The princess could have been hurt. Arcadios snarled angrily at Naruto while standing protectively in front of Hisui, having used his own body to shield her from the shockwave of the explosion. Naruto, however, simply ignored him and put the crystal in place before putting the panel back on. It's done, Naruto said as he jumped down and spoke with a thumb over his shoulder. The rest of the gate is fine. Only the secondary core is damaged. There is a failsafe inside the gate that deactivates all functions if one of two cores is damaged to prevent the whole thing from blowing up. You shouldn't have any problem turning it into a weapon now and maybe kill like 2 out of 10,000 dragons max by dropping the fucking thing onto them, so good luck. His statement caused Hisui to look at Arcadios worriedly, but Rogue had already spoke up before they could get the wrong idea. The Eclipse Cannon is our best chance, Naruto-san. It's better than nothing. With that said, Naruto raised a hand and beckoned for Celine and Sayla to come to him, which they did, walking up to stand behind the blonde as he adjusted his all-purpose tool and turned his glasses black with a tap of his middle finger. So, you are going to erase our memories now? Hisui asked, eyeing Naruto warily. Yes, princess. Naruto answered simply and then raised his purpose tool to his eyes level after handing Celine a pair of glasses similar to his. Aching the moon dragon god eyed the object curiously before putting them on, with Sayla doing the same with her own pair that Naruto had given her a long time ago. If you will, please look right here. Naruto then spoke in a formal tone and gestured his other hand to the red eye in the center of his all-purpose tool. Before anyone could try to look away, the blonde had pressed the button in the back, emitting a bright flash of red light that caused the eyes of every person standing before him to glaze over, looking confused and unfocused. Ha, work every time. Naruto said, chuckling in amusement. He lowered his tool down. Wait, that's it? Celine asked him as she took her glasses off, causing the blonde to stop whatever he was going to say next to turn and look at her. You just flash them and their memories are gone? I thought you were going to be smashing their heads in to make them forget about us or something. Let's be fair, I did more than just flash them. Naruto said as if he was offended by Celine's question, before raising his all-purpose tool and showing the red eye to Celine. The red eye here isolates and measures the electronic impulses in the brains, or more specifically, the ones for memory. It's called the electro-biomechanical neural transmitting zero synapse repositioner, or neuralizer for short. You can say that I have just neuralized them. Did you come up with that name? You know what? Don't answer that question, I don't want to know. Celine said before looking back at the princess, her bodyguard, the guards and future rogue, who were just staring blankly at the three of them. So what now? Well, we provide them with new memories of what has been happening the past few hours. Naruto answered with a shrug of his shoulders, finally putting his magic tool away. Or we can just leave them here and let them figure things out themselves. Good, let's leave them then. With that said, Celine turned away and used her magic to open a portal leading back to the street of Crocus before Naruto could say anything. I am hungry, and already bored of this place. Let's go to that restaurant you told me about. Grabbing his arm, Celine wasted no time to drag her lover through the portal, leaving Sayla to follow after them, after giving the group of people still staring blankly at her a look and then in order to leave the place and go back to what they were doing before getting their memories wiped by her master with her curse.
That's all for now. If you enjoy this video, then please like, share and do comments.